The trauma bay doors exploded inward with a force that sent clipboards scattering across the linoleum. 4 armed military escorts moved in formation, weapons drawn, eyes scanning every corner like they were clearing a hostile building. Between them, on a gurney slick with blood, a Navy commander convulsed, his chest a shredded mess of fabric and flesh, his breath coming in wet, desperate gasps. "Surgical team now!" someone screamed, but the commander's hand shot out, iron strong despite the blood loss, and locked around the wrist of a passing nurse in pale blue scrubs. His eyes, wild with pain and something else, recognition, fixed on her face. "Get her," he rasped, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "Or I don't make it." The room went silent, because he wasn't looking at the chief surgeon. He wasn't looking at the trauma director. He was looking at Emily Carter, a quiet 32-year-old white woman with blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, someone who'd worked at Riverside Memorial Hospital for 3 years without anyone remembering her name. Just a nurse. If you want to see how a woman dismissed as just a nurse becomes the only person who can save a dying commander, stick with me until the end. Drop a like, leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. Emily's fingers were still caught in the commander's grip when Dr. Richard Holloway, chief of surgery, shouldered past her. He was a tall man, silver-haired and sharp-featured, the kind of surgeon who'd built his reputation on confidence and control. Right now, both were on full display. "Step aside, nurse," he said without looking at her. "Let the professionals handle this." Emily tried to pull back, but the commander's fingers only tightened. His lips moved again, forming words that barely made it past the blood pooling in his throat. "She's done this before." Holloway ignored him. "Get him prepped for immediate surgery. I want a full trauma panel, cross-match 6 units, and someone get me his records." "There won't be records," one of the military escorts said. His voice was flat, professional, the kind that didn't expect to be questioned. "Commander Nash's mission status is classified." "I don't care if he was on the moon," Holloway snapped. "I need to know what I'm working with." Nash's hand jerked, pulling Emily closer. His eyes locked onto hers, and for just a second the chaos around them seemed to fall away. "Fragments," he whispered. "She knows what's inside me." Emily's breath caught. She looked down at the wounds, 3 distinct punctures across his upper chest and shoulder, edges burned and irregular. Not clean, not surgical. She'd seen this pattern before in a place she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. "Those aren't standard trauma wounds," she said quietly. Holloway was already barking orders to the residents. "Prep OR2. I want—" "Dr. Holloway," Emily's voice cut through, sharper than she'd intended. "Those are IED fragments. If you move him wrong, you'll sever the subclavian artery." The room went still. Holloway turned, and for the first time, he actually looked at her. His expression was somewhere between disbelief and irritation. "Excuse me?" "The entry pattern," Emily continued, forcing her voice steady. "The burn radius around the wounds, the depth variation. It's consistent with improvised explosive fragments. They don't move like shrapnel. They tumble. If one's near a major vessel and you shift him without imaging—" "I've been practicing trauma surgery for 23 years, Holloway said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "I think I can identify—" The monitor above Nash's head let out a sharp, sustained shriek. His blood pressure was dropping, fast. "He's crashing," one of the residents shouted. Holloway moved instantly, professional instinct overriding everything else. "Get him on his side. We need to—" "Don't!" Emily's voice cracked like a whip. "If there's a fragment against the vessel wall, lateral movement will dislodge it. You'll flood his chest cavity in seconds." "Nurse Carter, I don't have time for—" Nash's back arched. His eyes rolled back. The heart monitor flatlined into a single, endless tone. Emily didn't think. She moved. Her hands hit Nash's chest, starting compressions with a rhythm she hadn't used in 3 years, but could still feel in her bones. "Someone bag him, now, and get me a portable ultrasound." "What the hell do you think you're—" "But," Holloway started. 30 seconds, Emily said, not stopping. Her compressions were precise, measured, the kind of efficiency that came from doing this under fire. "You've got 30 seconds to decide if you want to save him or keep arguing with me." One of the residents, a young guy named Torres, grabbed the ultrasound cart. His hand shook as he powered it on. Holloway's jaw worked. Around them, the trauma bay had gone silent, except for the rhythmic thump of Emily's hands and the hiss of the bag valve mask another nurse had clamped over Nash's face. "Fine," Holloway bit out, "but if you're wrong, then you can fire me after he's stable." Emily didn't miss a compression. "Torres, get that probe on his upper chest. I need to see the subclavian." Torres fumbled with the ultrasound gel, his hands still shaking. Emily risked a glance at the monitor. Nash's rhythm was chaotic, his heart struggling to find a pattern. "Come on," she muttered. "Come on, Commander, don't you quit on me." The ultrasound screen flickered to life. Torres moved the probe across Nash's chest, and Emily's eyes tracked the grainy black and white image. There. A bright white fragment, no bigger than a dime, sitting less than 2 millimeters from the subclavian artery wall. "There," she said, "right subclavian. If that fragment shifts even a fraction—" "I see it." Holloway's voice had changed. The irritation was gone, replaced by something colder. Professional focus. "Get him to OR2. Carefully. I want him on a backboard, minimal lateral movement, and someone page Dr. Keene from vascular." Emily kept compressions going until they had Nash transferred. Her arms burned, her scrubs were soaked with blood, but she didn't stop until the OR doors swung closed behind him. Then finally she stepped back. Her hands were shaking. Around her, the trauma bay slowly came back to life. Nurses cleaning blood off the floor, residents murmuring to each other, the military escort standing in a tight cluster near the door, watching her with expressions she couldn't read. One of them, a woman with captain's bars and a scar cutting through her left eyebrow, approached. "That was impressive." Emily wiped her hands on her scrubs. "Just doing my job." "That wasn't just a job." The captain's eyes were sharp, assessing. "Where'd you learn to read IED trauma like that?" Emily's throat tightened. "I've seen it before." "Where?" Before Emily could answer, Holloway reappeared from the OR corridor. His surgical mask was pulled down, his expression unreadable. He walked straight up to Emily, and for a long moment he just stared at her. "He's stable," Holloway said finally. "We extracted 3 fragments. One was exactly where you said it was. If we'd moved him the way I wanted to—" He trailed off. "How did you know?" Emily met his gaze. "Experience." "What kind of experience does a floor nurse have with military trauma?" The military captain was still watching. So were half the residents. Emily felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. "I used to work in a different kind of hospital," she said carefully. Holloway's eyes narrowed. "What kind?" Before Emily could answer, one of the OR nurses appeared in the doorway. "Doctor?" "Holloway, Commander Nash is asking for someone. Says he won't stay sedated until he talks to her." "Who?" The nurse pointed at Emily. "Her." Holloway's expression went through several shifts: confusion, irritation, and finally resignation. "Fine. 5 minutes. But he needs rest." Emily followed the nurse down the corridor, her pulse hammering. She hadn't been inside an operating room in 3 years. Hadn't wanted to be. The smell hit her first. Antiseptic and blood. And something else. Something that dragged her back to sand and heat, and the sound of rotors overhead. Nash was on the table, his chest bandaged, monitors beeping steadily around him. His eyes found hers the moment she walked in. "You still got it," he said, his voice rough but clear. Emily stopped at the edge of the table. "Commander Nash." "You remember me, Carter?" She did. Not his name, not at first, but his face, younger then, less scarred. A memory surfaced, dust and smoke, a field hospital barely holding together, a young officer with a sucking chest wound who'd refused to let her stop working until everyone else was stable. "Kandahar," she said quietly. 7 years ago. Nash nodded. "You kept me alive long enough to evac, told me I'd owe you a beer when I made it home." He coughed, winced. "Took me a while to pay up." "You don't owe me anything." "The hell I don't." His eyes sharpened. "Why are you working as a floor nurse, Carter?" Emily's jaw tightened. "That's what I am now." "Bullshit. You were the best combat medic I ever saw. You ran surgical units under fire. I watched you hold a man's aorta together with your bare hands while mortars were landing 50 yards out." He paused. What happened? The door behind her opened. Dr. Holloway stepped in, his expression somewhere between curiosity and suspicion. Nurse Carter, he said slowly, perhaps you'd like to explain to me why a Navy commander seems to think you have surgical experience beyond basic triage? Emily's mouth went dry. Around them, she could feel the weight of the question, the way it hung in the air like smoke. Nash was watching her. Holloway was watching her. The entire trauma team, gathered just outside the OR doors, was watching her. She'd spent 3 years building a quiet life. 3 years where nobody asked questions, where she could just show up, do her job, and go home without the weight of everything she'd left behind. That life was about to end. I served, she said finally. Army medic. Deployed twice to Afghanistan, attached to forward surgical teams. Holloway's eyebrows rose. You're telling me you have combat surgical experience, and you've been working as a floor nurse for 3 years? Yes? Why? Emily didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the truth was too big, too complicated, too full of things she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself they weren't real. Nash's hand moved, catching her wrist again. Because someone screwed her, he said, his voice hard. Set her up to fail, and then buried the evidence when she didn't. Holloway looked between them. What are you talking about? Not here. Nash's grip tightened on Emily's wrist. But you need to know something, doctor. The woman standing in front of you saved more lives in 6 months than most surgeons save in a career. And someone made damn sure she'd never get credit for it. The monitors beeped steadily. Outside, Emily could hear voices, footsteps, the normal chaos of a hospital grinding forward. Holloway studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. I'm calling the chief of staff. We're going to have a conversation about your credentials, Nurse Carter. All of them. Emily's stomach dropped. Dr. Holloway, save it. If you have the experience Nash says you do, you've been wasting it for 3 years, and I want to know why. He left. The door swung shut behind him with a soft click. Nash was still watching her. You can't hide anymore, Carter. I wasn't hiding. Yes, you were. His voice gentled. I get it. I really do. But that life's over now. The moment those fragments landed in my chest, the moment you stepped up in that trauma bay, it's over. Emily pulled her wrist free. Her hands were shaking again. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to stop punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault. You don't know. I know what happened in Helmand Province, Nash said quietly. I know about the ambush. I know about the mass casualty event they sent you into with no backup, no supplies, and orders that made no damn sense. And I know you saved 83% of the casualties when the expected survival rate was less than 20. Emily's breath stopped. How do you... Because I requested the files. Took me 2 years and a favor from a Senate staffer, but I got them unsealed. Nash's eyes were steady on hers. You were set up, Carter. Sent into an impossible situation because someone wanted a scapegoat. When you didn't break, when you saved almost everyone, they buried the reports and let you think you'd failed. The words hit like a physical blow. Emily stepped back, her hip bumping against a supply cart. That's not... It's true. Every word. And the people responsible are still out there, still in positions of power because nobody stood up and called them out. Why are you telling me this? Because the fragments in my chest aren't from some random IED. They're from a targeted strike on a convoy I was escorting. Same kind of ambush, same kind of setup. Nash's voice went hard. And I'll be damned if I let the same people who tried to destroy you get away with trying to kill me. The door opened again. This time it was the military captain, the one with the scar. She looked at Nash, then at Emily. Commander, we need to move you. Now. What's happened? Nash asked. Intel just flagged a credible threat. Someone knew you were coming here. We have reason to believe the attack on your convoy wasn't random. Her eyes cut to Emily. And they might not be done. Emily's pulse spiked. What does that mean? The captain's hand moved to her sidearm. It means we're locking down this hospital. No one gets in or out until we know who we're dealing with. Outside in the distance, Emily heard it, the low thrum of helicopter rotors. Not medical. Military. The sound she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. Nash's hand found hers again. Welcome back to the war, Carter. The lights in the OR flickered once, then the building shook. Not an earthquake, not thunder, An explosion. Somewhere in the hospital, someone started screaming. The explosion wasn't close enough to shatter windows, but Emily felt it through the floor. A percussion wave that rattled instruments on their trays and made the overhead lights swing. The screaming outside the OR grew louder, more voices joining in, panic spreading like wildfire through the corridors. The captain's radio crackled to life. Multiple breaches, east wing, ground floor, we've got... Static drowned out the rest. The captain swore under her breath and keyed her radio again. Say again, repeat your last. Another voice cut through, younger, breathless. They're inside the building. Armed hostiles, at least 4, moving toward the surgical wing. We need immediate backup. Gunfire. Sharp cracks that echoed through the radio speaker, followed by shouting, and then nothing but dead air. The captain's hand tightened on her sidearm. She looked at Nash, then at Emily. We're moving you, both of you, now. I'm not going anywhere, Nash said. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead, but his voice was steady. I can't walk, Captain Reeves. You move me, you'll rip those sutures, and I'll bleed out before you get me 10 feet. Butcher Reeves's jaw clenched. Then we hold this position. Emily's mind was racing, her body moving on autopilot. She grabbed a surgical tray, dumped the instruments onto a sterile cloth, and shoved it toward the door. Barricade, we need to... The OR doors burst open. Dr. Holloway stumbled through, his white coat smeared with dust and something darker. Behind him, 2 nurses Emily recognized from the ICU, Sarah and an older woman named Patricia, their faces sheet white. Lock it, Holloway gasped. Lock the damn door, they're coming up the stairs. Reeves moved instantly, slamming the heavy door shut and throwing the internal bolt. It wouldn't hold forever, but it was something. She positioned herself to one side, weapon drawn, her body language shifting into something that looked like it had been trained into muscle memory. Emily's hands found Nash's wrist, checking his pulse. Still strong, still steady. What happened out there? Holloway was breathing hard, trying to catch his breath. Armed men, military gear. They came through the emergency entrance like they owned the place. Started rounding people up, asking where Commander Nash was being treated. How many? Reeves asked. I counted 6, maybe more. Holloway's eyes found Emily. They were asking about you too. Emily's blood went cold. Me? By name. Emily Carter. Said they had orders to secure both of you. Nash's hand caught Emily's arm. They're cleaning up. Whatever happened to my convoy, whoever set it up, they're tying off loose ends. Why me? Emily's voice came out sharper than she intended. I'm nobody. I've been out for 3 years. You're not nobody anymore, Nash said. The second you saved my life in front of witnesses, the second people started asking questions about your background, you became a problem. Reeves was checking the magazine on her sidearm. How many rounds you got, Captain? Emily blinked. What? Military. You served. Did they teach you to shoot? I was a medic, not... Did they teach you to shoot? Emily's throat tightened. Yes. Reeves pulled a backup pistol from an ankle holster and held it out. Then you're about to remember how. Emily stared at the weapon. It was a compact 9mm, well-maintained, the grip worn smooth from use. She hadn't held a gun in 3 years, hadn't wanted to. The weight of it in her hand brought back memories she'd spent every day since her discharge trying to bury. I can't. You can, Nash said quietly, and you will. Because if they get through that door, we're all dead. Holloway was looking between them like they'd lost their minds. This is a hospital. We have security. We have police. Your security is dead or running, Reeves said flatly. Police response time in this part of Riverside is 8 minutes on a good day. We've got maybe 3 before those doors come down. The nurse named Sarah was crying silently, her hands pressed against her mouth. Patricia had gone to Nash's other side, checking his vitals, with shaking hands but refusing to fall apart. Emily recognized the look. Someone who'd been through hell before and knew the only way out was forward. Footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy boots, multiple people, moving with the kind of coordination that spoke of training. Reeves held up a hand for silence. Everyone froze. A voice came through the door, muffled but clear enough. We know you're in there, Captain. Commander Nash needs medical evacuation. We're here to help. Reeves didn't respond. Her eyes were on the door, tracking the shadows visible through the gap at the bottom. The voice continued. We're with naval intelligence operating under emergency protocols. Open the door and nobody gets hurt. Nash's laugh was bitter. Naval intelligence doesn't send kill teams to hospitals. Emily's grip tightened on the pistol. Her palms were sweating. The weapon felt foreign and familiar at the same time, like picking up a language she'd once been fluent in but hadn't spoken in years. "Last chance," the voice outside said. "Open the door or we're coming through." Reeves looked at Emily. "You remember how to use that?" "Safety's off," Emily said quietly. 15 rounds, 1 in the chamber. "Good. When they come through, you keep Nash alive. That's your only job. Understand?" Emily nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. The voice outside went silent. For 5 seconds, the world held its breath. Then the door exploded inward. Not an explosion, not exactly, a battering ram, industrial grade, the kind designed to punch through reinforced barriers. The bolt held for 1 hit, 2, and on the third the entire frame splintered. The door swung wide and men poured through, 4 of them, dressed in tactical black, faces covered, weapons up. Reeves fired first. 2 shots. Center mass, and the lead man went down hard. The others scattered, taking cover behind overturned equipment carts and the OR's structural pillars. Emily dropped to her knees beside Nash's table, the pistol coming up instinctively. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. Everything had gone quiet in her head. The same cold clarity she'd felt under fire in Kandahar, in Helmand, in a dozen firefights she'd tried to forget. One of the hostiles swung his rifle toward Reeves. Emily fired twice, not at him, at the IV stand beside him. The metal pole rang like a bell, and the man flinched, his shot going wide. Reeves used the opening to put 2 rounds through his shoulder. He dropped, screaming, "Get down!" Holloway was shouting at the nurses, pulling them toward the corner where the anesthesia equipment provided some cover. The remaining 2 hostiles were advancing, one moving right while the other laid down suppressing fire. Reeves caught the movement and shifted her aim, but she was pinned behind the surgical tray cart, unable to get a clean shot. Emily's mind was calculating angles, distances, the way it used to when she was triaging casualties under fire. The hostile moving right was using the equipment as cover, getting closer to Nash's position. If he reached the table, it was over. She didn't think. She moved. Emily came up from behind the table, the pistol extended in a 2-handed grip, and fired 3 times in rapid succession. The first shot missed, punching through a heart monitor. The second caught the hostile in the thigh. The third hit his weapon and the rifle clattered to the floor. He went down cursing, reaching for a sidearm. Reeves finished him with a single shot to the chest. The last hostile made a break for the door. Reeves tracked him, fired, but the angle was wrong and the shot sparked off the door frame. He disappeared into the corridor, his boots hammering on the linoleum. Then silence. Reeves was breathing hard, her weapon still up, scanning for threats. "Everyone okay?" Emily's ears were ringing from the gunfire in the enclosed space. She checked Nash. His vitals were spiking, adrenaline flooding his system, but he was alive. Holloway and the nurses were huddled in the corner, Patricia white-faced but steady, Sarah sobbing into her hands. 3 down, Reeves said, moving to check the bodies. 1 runner. He'll bring reinforcements. How many more? Emily asked. Assume at least 3. Maybe a full team. Reeves was already reloading her weapon with smooth, practiced movements. We can't stay here. Nash coughed, grimacing. Can't move me either, not without tearing everything open. Then we fortify, Emily said. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears, flat, professional, the tone she'd used when coordinating mass casualty responses. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they regroup. We use that time to prepare. Holloway stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Prepare for what? This is insane. We need to survive, Emily cut him off. And right now that means turning this OR into a position we can hold. She was already moving, her hands working on autopilot. The surgical table went against the damaged door. Not enough to stop determined attackers, but enough to slow them. Equipment carts repositioned to create firing lanes. Reeves watched her work, something like approval flickering across her face. You've done this before, Reeves said. Field hospitals aren't that different from ORs, Emily replied. Just bloodier. Patricia had stopped crying. She stood up, smoothing her scrubs, and moved to help Emily shift a heavy supply cabinet. What do you need? Anything we can use as barriers, and if you've got a scalpel handy, I'll take it. Sarah looked up, her eyes red but focused. There's a trauma kit in the cabinet. Surgical tools, clamps, the works. Get it. The two nurses moved together, their earlier panic replaced by the kind of focused efficiency that came from years of emergency room work. Emily felt something shift in the room. The terror that had paralyzed them was still there, but now it had direction, purpose. Nash was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're different when you're in the field. Everyone is? No, not like this. His voice was quiet enough that only she could hear. You stop pretending to be small. Emily didn't answer. She was checking the pistol Reeves had given her, counting the remaining rounds. 9 left. Not enough if they had to hold for long. Footsteps outside again. More this time. Reeves moved to the door, listening. A different voice came through, older, with the kind of authority that expected to be obeyed. Captain Reeves, my name is Colonel Marcus Webb. I'm here under direct orders from the Pentagon to secure Commander Nash and retrieve classified materials related to his mission. Stand down and let us do our job. Reeves's expression went cold. Colonel Webb isn't in the Pentagon anymore. He was forced out 6 months ago for running illegal black ops. The voice outside paused, then quieter, more dangerous. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Good, Reeves called back. I like things hard. Emily heard the click of a radio outside, someone giving orders in a voice too low to make out. Then silence again. Nash spoke up, loud enough to carry through the damaged door. Webb, I know what you did. The convoy ambush, the setup, I've got documentation. Signed affidavits, classified intel, all of it uploaded to secure servers with dead man switches. You kill me, it all goes public. Another pause. Then Webb's voice again, colder now. You're bluffing. Try me. Emily's mind was racing. Nash had known this was coming. He'd prepared for it. But if he had all that evidence, why hadn't he gone public already? Why come to Riverside Memorial instead of going straight to federal authorities? The answer hit her like cold water. He hadn't come here for medical treatment. He'd come here for her. She looked at Nash, and he met her eyes with something that might have been an apology. You used yourself as bait, she said quietly. I needed to draw them out, needed to force them to act in a way that couldn't be denied or covered up. He coughed, wincing. And I needed someone I could trust to keep me alive long enough to see it through. You son of a... An explosion rocked the room, not at the door this time, above them, in the ceiling. Dust and acoustic tile rained down, and through the gap Emily could see the floor above, the psychiatric ward, now filled with smoke and firelight. They're burning us out, Reeves said flatly. The sprinkler system kicked in, water cascading from the ceiling. Within seconds, everyone was drenched, visibility dropping as steam rose from the hot debris. Emily could hear alarms now. The hospital-wide evacuation signal, hundreds of patients and staff scrambling for exits. Holloway grabbed Emily's arm. We have to go. Now! The whole building could come down. I can't move him, Emily said, gesturing to Nash. Not in his condition. Then he dies here, and so do we. Nash's hand found Emily's again. His grip was weaker now, blood seeping through his bandages where the exertion had torn something loose. Leave me. Get everyone else out. Not a chance. Carter, I said no. Emily's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. She looked at Reeves. How long until the fire spreads? 5 minutes, maybe less. Then we've got 4 minutes to find another way out. Emily turned to Patricia. The OR suites are all connected through the sterilization corridor, right? Patricia nodded, water streaming down her face. Goes to the central supply room, then down to the loading docks. Can we get a gurney through? If we move fast. Emily looked at Holloway. Help me get him transferred. We're going to need... The door blew inward completely this time, the table Emily had used as a barricade flying across the room like it weighed nothing. Webb's team poured through, 6 of them now, weapons up, fanning out with military precision. Reeves opened fire immediately. 1 hostile went down. 2. But there were too many, and they had better positions, better gear. Emily grabbed the surgical tray and threw it. Scalpels and clamps scattered like shrapnel, forcing one of the hostiles to duck. She fired her pistol twice more, providing cover while Reeves repositioned. Go! Reeves shouted. Get him out of here! Holloway and Patricia were already moving, unlocking the gurney's wheels, trying to maneuver Nash toward the back exit while water poured down and gunfire echoed off the walls. One of Webb's men broke through Reeves's line, his rifle swinging toward Nash. Emily didn't hesitate. She threw herself between them, the pistol coming up, and fired her last 3 rounds. 2 missed in the chaos. The third caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He didn't go down. His rifle came back up, finger on the trigger. The corridor behind him exploded. Not fire this time, something else. A concussive blast that threw the hostile forward, his weapon clattering away. Through the smoke and water and chaos, Emily saw figures moving. New ones. Military uniforms, but different from Webb's tactical gear. These were official, legitimate. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "This is the United States Marine Corps. Drop your weapons and get on the ground, now!" Webb's remaining men hesitated, looking to their commander. Webb himself was visible now through the damaged door, his face twisted with rage and something else. Calculation. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Webb raised his weapon toward Nash. Reeves fired first. The shot took Webb in the chest and he went down hard. His men dropped their rifles instantly, hands going up, surrendering to the Marines who were flooding in through both entrances. The shooting stopped. The alarms kept wailing, water kept pouring, but the gunfire was over. Emily's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the wet floor, the empty pistol still in her hand, her whole body shaking with adrenaline crash. Marine Corps personnel were everywhere now, securing the scene, checking the wounded, barking orders into radios. A medic team rushed to Nash, working with rapid efficiency to stabilize him for transport. A Marine lieutenant approached Reeves, saluting crisply. "Captain Reeves, we received your distress signal 20 minutes ago. Apologies for the delay. We had to secure the perimeter first." "Signal?" Reeves looked confused. "I didn't send—" Nash, being loaded onto a proper medical gurney, managed a weak smile. "I did. Before the convoy left base, the dead man switch, remember? Signal went out the moment my biometrics hit critical." The lieutenant looked at Emily, still sitting in the puddle of water and blood. "You Emily Carter?" Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. "Commander Nash has been asking for you. Says there's something you need to see." The lieutenant held out a sealed envelope, military grade, with classification stamps across the front. "He said to tell you it's time to stop running." Emily took the envelope with numb fingers. It was heavy, packed with documents. Through the transparent window on the front, she could see her own name on the top page, along with a date from 7 years ago and a header that made her blood run cold. Incident report, Helmand Province, mass casualty event, classified. Holloway appeared beside her, soaking wet, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last 30 minutes. "What is that?" Emily broke the seal. Her hands were shaking again as she pulled out the first page and started reading. The report was exhaustive. Radio transcripts, casualty lists, medical records. And buried in the middle, a section marked Command Decision Analysis. That detailed exactly what Nash had told her. The ambush had been deliberate. She'd been sent into an impossible situation with orders designed to overwhelm any response. Also, certain officers could justify budget increases and equipment contracts by pointing to inadequate medical preparedness in theater. But when she'd saved 83% of the casualties anyway, when she'd performed battlefield surgery that shouldn't have been possible with the resources she had, it had made the wrong people look incompetent. So they'd buried the report, altered her records, and let her believe she'd failed. "They destroyed my career," Emily said quietly, "because I made them look bad." The lieutenant shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, there's more. Page 15. Emily flipped through the documents. Page 15 was a roster. Names, ranks, current assignments. She recognized some of them. Officers who'd been present during the Helmand incident. Several had been promoted since then. 3 were now in positions of significant authority. And at the bottom of the list, a name highlighted in yellow, Colonel Marcus Webb. Webb, who'd been one of the logistics officers responsible for supply chain management in Helmand Province. Webb, who would have been held accountable if the incident had been properly investigated. Webb, who'd spent the years since climbing the ranks while making sure Emily's records stayed buried. "He's been tracking you," the lieutenant said. "We found surveillance files at his off-site facility. Photos, movement patterns, everything. When Commander Nash started digging into the Helmand incident, Webb panicked. He ordered the convoy hit, tried to eliminate both of you before the truth could come out. Emily looked across the room to where Webb lay on the floor, Marines securing him in flex cuffs despite the chest wound Reeves had given him. His eyes found hers, and even through the pain she saw the hatred there. She stood up slowly, her legs steadier now, walked over to where he lay. The Marines tensed, but nobody stopped her. 7 years, Emily said quietly. You let me think I failed those soldiers. Let me walk away believing I wasn't good enough. Webb's laugh was wet with blood. You weren't supposed to save them. The whole point was, I know what the point was. Money, contracts, career advancement. Emily crouched down, close enough to see the fear starting to creep into his eyes. But here's what you didn't count on. Those soldiers I saved, they remembered. They talked. They've been asking questions for years, and now those questions have answers. She held up the documents. This is going to everyone. Every news outlet, every senator, every military investigator, and your name is on every page. Webb's expression crumbled. Not physically, he was still trying to maintain that officer's arrogance, but something behind his eyes broke. Emily stood up, tucking the documents inside her scrubs. She looked at the Marines. He needs medical attention. Don't let him die. I want him to stand trial. The lieutenant nodded sharply. Yes, ma'am. Emily walked back to where Nash was being prepped for transport. His color was better now, the Marine medics having given him fluids and proper bandaging. He looked up at her as she approached. You good? He asked. Getting there. Emily glanced at the envelope in her hands. Why now? Why drag me into this? Because it was never just about me. Webb and the others like him. They're still out there, still making decisions that get people killed, still burying the truth when it's inconvenient. Nash's voice was getting stronger. I needed someone who'd understand what this fight was really about. Someone who'd already paid the price for telling the truth. Emily looked around the destroyed OR. Bullet holes in the walls, blood on the floor, equipment ruined. Hell of a way to ask for help. Would you have listened if I'd just called? She wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe she would have stepped up, faced the past, fought back. But the truth was, she'd spent 3 years hiding, telling herself she was over it, that she'd moved on. No, she admitted. I wouldn't have. Nash nodded. That's why I came here, forced your hand, made you remember who you used to be. He paused. I'm sorry it had to be this way. The Marine medics were ready to move him. One of them looked at Emily. You want to ride with him? We're evacing to Naval Medical Center. Full security detail. Emily looked at Holloway, who was still standing there looking shell-shocked. Doctor? Holloway blinked, coming back to himself. Go, we'll handle things here. But when this is over, we're having a very long conversation about your employment status. Am I fired? Are you kidding? After what I just watched? Holloway shook his head. You're getting promoted. Soon as you're cleared to come back. Emily felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she hadn't known was there. Thank you. She climbed into the ambulance behind Nash's gurney, Reeves joining them a moment later. Through the open doors, Emily could see the hospital exterior for the first time. Fire trucks, police cars, military vehicles, news crews already setting up across the street. This was going public, all of it. Her name, her face, her story. Everything she'd tried to leave behind was about to be front-page news. The ambulance doors closed and they pulled away from Riverside Memorial with sirens wailing. Nash was watching her. You okay? Emily looked down at the envelope in her lap, at the documents that proved she'd never failed, that she'd been sabotaged by people who should have protected her. 7 years of guilt, of second-guessing herself, of wondering if she was good enough, all of it built on lies. Ask me in a week, she said. But even as she said it, she felt something shifting. The weight she'd been carrying was still there, but it was different now, lighter. Because it wasn't shame anymore, it was anger. And anger, she was learning, could be useful. The ambulance hit a pothole, jostling everyone inside. Reeves steadied herself against the wall, then looked at Emily with an expression that might have been respect. You handled yourself back there, Reeves said. Most people freeze their first firefight back. That wasn't my first. I know, I can tell. Reeves paused. What are you going to do after all this? Emily didn't have an answer. 24 hours ago, she'd been a floor nurse with a quiet life and a buried past. Now that past was exploding into the present, and the future was uncertain in ways that made her chest tight. But as the ambulance raced through Riverside streets, lights flashing, Emily realized something. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. The ambulance pulled into the secured entrance of Naval Medical Center 40 minutes later. The facility was locked down, armed guards at every access point, helicopters circling overhead. They wheeled Nash directly into a surgical suite, the trauma team already assembled and waiting. Emily started to follow, but a hand caught her arm. She turned to find a man in a dark suit, FBI credentials clipped to his belt. "Ms. Carter, I'm Special Agent David Kowalski. I need to ask you some questions about tonight's events." "Can it wait? Commander Nash needs—" "The commander's in good hands. This can't wait." Kowalski's expression was neutral, professional, but there was something in his eyes that made Emily's instincts flare. "There are some inconsistencies in your military record we need to clear up." Emily's stomach dropped. "What kind of inconsistencies?" "The kind that suggests someone's been altering official documents for years, and we need to know if you were part of that or a victim of it." Behind Kowalski, Emily saw more suits. FBI, probably. Maybe DOD investigators. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about everything. Helmand, the cover-up, the officers involved, the entire chain of corruption that had led to Webb's team storming a civilian hospital. She was about to become the key witness in a case that would tear through the military's upper ranks like a chainsaw. Kowalski was waiting for an answer. Emily thought about running, about claiming she needed medical attention, about finding some way to delay what was coming. Then she thought about the soldiers in Helmand, the ones she'd saved and the ones she'd lost, the ones who'd been used as pawns in someone else's career game. "I'll tell you everything," Emily said, "but I want it on record, all of it. No sealed testimony, no classified hearings. If I'm doing this, the truth goes public." Kowalski studied her for a long moment, then he nodded. "I think that can be arranged." He led her toward a secure conference room, past armed guards and security checkpoints. Through a window, Emily caught a glimpse of Nash being wheeled into surgery, already sedated, the trauma team moving with practiced efficiency. He'd survive. She'd made sure of that. Now she had to make sure the people who'd tried to kill him and destroy her paid for what they'd done. The conference room door closed behind her with a heavy click. Kowalski set a recorder on the table between them. "Start from the beginning," he said. "Tell me everything about Helmand Province." Emily took a breath, and for the first time in 7 years, she started talking. Emily talked for 4 hours straight. She told Kowalski about the ambush outside Forward Operating Base Garrett, about the radio call that had come in at 0347 hours reporting mass casualties from an IED strike on a supply convoy. She described the scene when the helicopters dropped her team into chaos. 18 wounded soldiers scattered across 100 meters of kill zone, still under sporadic fire, the nearest surgical facility 40 minutes away by air. She told him about the orders that made no sense, the supply manifest that listed equipment her team never received, the communications blackout that left them operating blind for 6 critical hours. And she told him about the 83 soldiers she'd kept alive through sheer stubbornness and skills she hadn't known she possessed. Kowalski listened without interrupting, the recorder spinning steadily between them. When Emily finally stopped, her throat raw, he sat back and rubbed his eyes. "You're telling me you performed battlefield surgery without a surgeon present," he said. "I had a physician's assistant who'd done a trauma rotation and a combat lifesaver certified corporal. That's it." Emily's hands were wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. "We did what we had to do." "And the after-action report says you lost 60% of the casualties." "The after-action report is a lie." Kowalski pulled out a tablet, tapped through several screens, and turned it toward her. "These are the official records, signed by 3 separate officers, all confirming catastrophic losses due to inadequate medical response." Emily looked at the names. 2 she didn't recognize. The third made her stomach turn. Major General Richard Vance, currently serving as Deputy Commander of Medical Operations at the Pentagon. "Vance was the logistics officer responsible for our supply chain," Emily said quietly. He's the one who approved the manifest that sent us in without half the equipment we needed. And if the real casualty numbers had been reported, he would have been investigated, probably court-martialed. Emily set down the coffee cup. Instead, he got promoted. Kowalski made a note on his tablet. We've been looking into Vance for the last 18 months. Webb's records had his name all over them, but we couldn't establish a direct connection. Until now. What do you mean? Webb kept insurance, digital files, communications logs, recorded conversations. He knew he was running illegal operations, so he made sure he had leverage if it went sideways. Kowalski's expression was grim. We seized his servers tonight, found documentation of 15 separate incidents over the last decade, where medical supplies were diverted, casualty reports were falsified, and personnel files were altered. Your case was just one of many. Emily felt something cold settle in her chest. How many people? We're still counting, but preliminary estimates suggest at least 200 service members had their records tampered with. Some were forced out like you. Others faced courts-martial for failures that weren't their fault. 3 committed suicide. The room felt too small suddenly. Emily stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, the Naval Medical Center grounds were lit up like a prison yard. Floodlights, armed patrols, the kind of security that said someone important was inside. Nash knew all of this? She asked. Some of it. He started digging after his convoy was hit, realized the ambush was too precise to be random, found connections between Webb and the insurgent cell that carried out the attack. Kowalski paused. Webb was selling intelligence, mission routes, patrol schedules, supply convoy timings, getting paid by enemy forces to compromise our own operations. Emily's hands curled into fists against the windowsill. How long? At least 6 years, maybe longer. 6 years, hundreds of soldiers, billions in diverted funds. And it had all been protected by a network of officers more interested in their careers than the people they were supposed to lead. Her reflection in the window looked older than 32. Tired. But there was something else there too, something that hadn't been present 3 years ago when she'd walked away from the military. Purpose. The door opened behind her. Emily turned to find Captain Reeves, now out of her tactical gear and wearing a clean uniform. She looked as exhausted as Emily felt. Commander Nash is out of surgery, Reeves said. Stable. They're moving him to intensive care in 30 minutes. Can I see him? That's why I'm here. He's asking for you. Kowalski stood up, gathering his notes. We'll need to continue this tomorrow. There's a lot more to cover. I'll be here, Emily said. She followed Reeves through the corridors, past security checkpoints and Marine guards who snapped to attention as they passed. The hospital was quieter than Riverside Memorial, more controlled, but the tension was still there, in the way staff moved with urgent efficiency, in the armed presence at every junction. Nash's room was in the secure wing, 2 guards outside the door and another inside. He was awake, propped up on pillows, his chest wrapped in fresh bandages. The color had returned to his face, but his eyes were sharp, alert. You look terrible, he said when Emily entered. You look dead. I win. She pulled a chair next to the bed. How are you feeling? Like I got blown up and then shot at for an hour. Nash managed a weak smile. But alive thanks to you. Thanks to a lot of people. No, thanks to you. His voice was firm. You could have walked away, could have let Holloway handle it, stayed invisible like you've been doing for 3 years. But you didn't. Emily didn't know how to respond to that, so she changed the subject. Kowalski told me about Webb's files. About Vance. Nash's expression darkened. It's worse than you think. Vance isn't working alone. We've identified at least 6 other officers in key positions: procurement, logistics, personnel management. They've built an entire system designed to funnel money and resources while burying anyone who asks questions. How do we stop them? We don't. The FBI does, DOD investigators, maybe Congress if they grow a spine. Nash shifted, wincing. But they need evidence, testimony. Someone willing to stand up in front of cameras and congressional committees and lay out exactly what happened. Emily's stomach tightened. You want me to go public? I want you to have a choice. You can walk away from this. Let the investigators do their work quietly. Your name stays out of it. You go back to Riverside Memorial, live your life. He paused. Or you can fight. Tell your story. Make sure everyone knows what they did to you and the others. If I do that, you'll never be anonymous again. Every news outlet will want interviews. Defense attorneys will come after your credibility. People who don't want the truth to come out will make your life hell. Nash's eyes were steady on hers. It won't be easy. Emily thought about the last 3 years, the quiet shifts, the apartment she came home to alone, the careful way she'd built a life that required nothing from her except showing up and doing her job. Safe. Small. Invisible. When do they need an answer? She asked. Soon. Kowalski's team wants to move fast before Vance and the others can destroy evidence or disappear. Before Emily could respond, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, expecting another message from the FBI or maybe Holloway checking in. Instead, it was an unknown number. A text message with a single line. You should have stayed quiet. Then a photo loaded. Emily's apartment. The front door standing open, belongings scattered across the floor, everything torn apart. Nash saw her expression change. What is it? Emily showed him the phone. His face went hard. Reeves! He shouted. The captain appeared in the doorway instantly, hand on her sidearm. Nash gestured to Emily's phone. Get a team to that address, now, and put Ms. Carter under protective custody. Reeves took one look at the image and was already on her radio, barking orders. Within seconds, Emily could hear boots in the corridor, voices coordinating. They're sending a message, Nash said, trying to scare you into backing down. It's working. Emily's voice was steadier than she felt. But not the way they think. Another text came through. This one was a video file. Emily's thumb hovered over it, some instinct screaming not to open it. She opened it anyway. The video showed the inside of her apartment. Someone was moving through it with a camera, systematically destroying everything. Books pulled off shelves, furniture overturned, dishes smashed. Then the camera panned to the wall above her couch, where someone had spray-painted a message in red, "Traitors don't get to hide." The video ended. Emily felt cold all over. This wasn't just intimidation. This was personal. Someone wanted her to know they could reach her anywhere, that nowhere was safe. Where were you planning to go after this? Nash asked quietly. Home, my apartment. Emily laughed, a brittle sound. Guess that's not an option anymore. You'll stay here. Naval Medical has secure housing for protected witnesses. It's not luxury, but it's safe. For how long? As long as it takes. Emily looked at her phone again, at the spray-painted message. Something about it felt familiar. Not the words themselves, but the phrasing, the specific shade of red paint. She zoomed in on the image, studying the edges of the letters. Nash, look at this. He leaned over, squinting at the screen. What am I looking at? The paint. See how it's dripping? That's fresh, maybe an hour old. Emily's mind was working through the timeline. But we left Riverside 4 hours ago. How did they know where I lived, get access to my apartment, and trash it that fast? Nash's expression shifted. They've been watching you, for a while. Or they had this plan before tonight even happened. Emily felt her pulse quicken. They knew I'd surface eventually. Knew that if Nash came to Riverside, I'd get involved, so they prepared. Which means there's still several steps ahead of us. A knock at the door. One of the Marine guards poked his head in. Commander Nash, Agent Kowalski is here with an update. Kowalski entered looking worse than he had an hour ago, his tie loosened, jacket gone. We've got a problem. General Vance just checked himself into Walter Reed Medical Center, citing a cardiac event. He's in private care, no visitors, and his lawyers are already blocking our access. He's running, Nash said. Worse, he's establishing an alibi and medical excuse for why he can't be questioned. Kowalski rubbed his face. Webb's servers had files that directly implicate Vance in the Hellman cover-up and the convoy ambush. But without testimony connecting those documents to actual orders and actions, they're just data. We need someone who can verify what happened on the ground. He was looking at Emily. You want me to testify against a 2-star general, she said. I want you to tell the truth. What Vance does with his career after that is his problem. Emily thought about the soldiers in Helmand, the ones who'd survived because she'd refused to give up, even when everything was falling apart, the ones who'd gone home with scars and trauma, but at least they'd gone home. When? she asked. Tomorrow. Emergency congressional hearing. Closed session initially, but it'll leak within hours. The whole country will know your name by dinner time. Kowalski's expression was sympathetic. I know it's fast, but if we wait, Vance and his people will have time to build their defense, discredit you, make this go away like they've made everything else go away. Nash's hand found Emily's wrist. You don't have to do this. Yeah, I do. Emily stood up, her legs steadier than they'd been all night. Because if I don't, someone else will end up in my position. Some other medic or nurse or soldier will get scapegoated for someone else's corruption, and they'll spend years thinking they failed when they didn't. She looked at Kowalski. I'll testify, but I want guarantees, full protection, not just for me, but for anyone else who comes forward. And I want everything on record. No sealed testimony, no redactions. That's how it works if you want my cooperation. Emily's voice was hard. These people destroyed careers and lives because they could operate in the dark. If we're exposing them, we do it in the light. All of it. Kowalski studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll make the calls. But you need to understand what you're signing up for. The hearing is just the start. There'll be depositions, trials, media scrutiny. Your entire life will be examined and dissected. Let them look. They won't find anything because I didn't do anything wrong. Emily felt something settling inside her, a kind of clarity she hadn't experienced in years. I'm done being ashamed of something that wasn't my fault. Kowalski left to make arrangements. Nash was watching Emily with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked. You remind me of someone I served with a long time ago. Best officer I ever knew. Refused to compromise, even when it cost her everything. He paused. She ended up getting forced out too. Last I heard, she was teaching high school history in Montana. What was her name? Doesn't matter. Point is, the military has a way of crushing people who don't fit the mold. People who ask questions, who prioritize doing the right thing over following orders. Nash's voice was quiet. You survived that. Not everyone does. Emily thought about the 3 suicides Kowalski had mentioned. Service members who'd been scapegoated like her, but hadn't found a way through the darkness. I almost didn't, she admitted. There were nights, especially the first year after I got out, where I thought about just stopping. It would have been easier than carrying around the guilt. What changed? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe I was just too stubborn to quit. Emily looked at her hands, remembering how they'd shaken the first few months after her discharge, how she'd had to relearn basic tasks because the tremors were so bad. Or maybe some part of me knew the guilt didn't fit right, like it was something someone else had put on me and I'd just accepted it without question. And now? Now I'm taking it off. Reeves returned with an update on Emily's apartment. Teams on site. Place is clear, no hostiles present. They're processing it as a crime scene, but preliminary sweep shows mostly property damage. No explosives, no biological hazards. Anything salvageable? Emily asked. Some clothes, personal items. We'll have it cataloged and brought here. Reeves paused. There's something else. The building's security system was disabled 2 hours before the break-in. Professional job, not random vandalism. So they had access to the security systems, Nash said. That's not street-level intimidation. That's coordinated. Gets better. We pulled traffic cameras from the area. Found a vehicle leaving the scene. Black SUV, government plates, registered to a DOD motor pool in Virginia. Emily's stomach dropped. DOD? Specifically, a motor pool assigned to senior officer transportation. Reeves's expression was grim. Someone with access to military resources ordered that hit on your apartment. Vance, Nash said. Can't prove it yet. But the timing's suspicious. Vance checks into Walter Reed with a cardiac event, and 3 hours later, Emily's apartment gets tossed by people using DOD vehicles. Emily felt the walls closing in. Vance wasn't just a corrupt general. He had resources, personnel, and enough institutional protection to operate with impunity. And now he knew she was a threat. How many people does he have? She asked. Unknown, but based on Webb's files, we're looking at a network that spans multiple installations and command structures. Could be dozens of people in positions to help him. Then how do we fight that? We don't, Reeves said. You testify tomorrow. Put everything on record. After that, it's out of your hands. The investigators take over, and Vance either goes down or he doesn't. And if he doesn't? Nobody answered that question. Emily's phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. You think Nash can protect you? Check the news. Emily pulled up a news site on her phone. The top headline made her blood run cold. Navy commander's convoy ambushed. Survivor in critical condition. Questions raised about mission security. Below it, a subheadline. Anonymous military sources suggest Commander Nash may have compromised classified operations. Emily showed the screen to Nash and Reeves. Nash's face went pale. They're getting ahead of it, he said quietly. Framing the narrative before you can testify. Emily scrolled through the article. It was carefully written, full of unnamed sources and vague insinuations, but the message was clear. Nash was being painted as a security risk, someone whose reckless actions had gotten his own people killed, and buried in the sixth paragraph, a single sentence that made Emily's hands shake. Sources close to the investigation say Nash may have been working with a civilian nurse with a history of medical malpractice and questionable military service. They're coming after me too, Emily said. Reeves was already on her phone making calls. We need to get ahead of this. Issue a statement, correct the record. It won't matter, Nash interrupted. By the time we respond, the damage is done. People will believe the first thing they hear, and right now the first thing they're hearing is that we're both compromised. Emily felt something snapping inside her, not breaking, but shifting, the last piece of hesitation falling away. For 3 years, she'd stayed quiet, accepted the narrative others had built around her, convinced herself that keeping her head down was the same as moving on. She was done keeping her head down. I want to talk to the press, she said. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. Emily, that's not... Nash started. I want to talk to the press, she repeated, her voice firm. Not tomorrow after the hearing. Tonight. Now. I want to tell my story before they can twist it any further. Kowalski, who'd returned during the discussion, shook his head. That's a terrible idea. You'll compromise the investigation, give Vance's lawyers ammunition, and paint a target on yourself. The target's already there, and the investigation is compromised the second Vance's people start controlling the narrative. Emily looked at each of them in turn. You said I had a choice. This is me choosing. You'll be going in without preparation, without legal counsel. I don't need preparation. I know what happened. I was there. Nash was watching her with something like pride. If you do this, you can't walk it back. Every word you say will be dissected, used against you. Are you ready for that? Emily thought about the soldiers in Helmand, about the years she'd spent believing she'd failed them, about the text messages and the trashed apartment and the news articles already painting her as incompetent. I've been ready for 7 years, she said. I just didn't know it. Reeves made a call. 15 minutes later, Emily was in a different room with better lighting and a camera crew from a major news network. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel Morrison, who'd made her career on military investigations, sat across from her with a notepad and a recorder. Ms. Carter, thank you for agreeing to speak with us on such short notice. I understand tonight's events at Riverside Memorial were traumatic. Emily met Morrison's eyes steadily. What happened tonight was an assassination attempt on a Navy commander who was investigating corruption in military procurement and medical services. It failed because good people refused to stand down. Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. That's a serious allegation. It's the truth, and I have documentation to back it up. For the next 30 minutes, Emily laid it out. Helmand Province, the falsified reports, the cover-up, Webb's operation, Vance's involvement. She didn't hold back, didn't soften the details, didn't try to make herself look better than she was. She just told the truth. Morrison listened without interrupting, her expression growing more shocked as the story unfolded. When Emily finished, the reporter sat back. This is going to cause an earthquake, Morrison said quietly. Good. It should. You understand that powerful people are going to come after you for this. They're already coming after me. At least now everyone will know why. The interview ended. Morrison's crew packed up their equipment, and Emily was escorted back to the secure wing where Nash was waiting. How'd it go? He asked. I have no idea, but it's done. The interview airs in 2 hours. By midnight, everyone in the country with a television will know your name. Emily sat down heavily in the chair beside his bed. I should be terrified. But you're not. No, I'm angry, and apparently anger is easier to deal with than fear. Nash laughed, then winced, his hand going to his bandaged chest. Don't make me laugh. Hurts like hell. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the hospital around them. Eventually, Reeves appeared with an update. Your interview's causing chaos already. DOD is scrambling to respond, Vance's lawyers are demanding retractions, and every news outlet in the country is trying to verify your claims. Can they? Emily asked. Some of it, yeah. Webb's arrest is public record now, and we've confirmed that his team attacked Riverside Memorial. The rest, the Hellman stuff, Vance's involvement, that'll take time. How much time? Days, maybe weeks. But the hearing tomorrow will help. Congressional testimony carries weight. Emily's phone buzzed. She almost didn't check it, expecting another threat, another attempt at intimidation. Instead, it was a message from Holloway. Just saw the news. You're either the bravest person I know or completely insane. Probably both. The hospital board wants to talk to you when this is over. About a new position. Call me. She showed the message to Nash, who grinned. See? Already paying off. But Emily was looking at another message that had come through, this one from an unknown number. You just signed your own death warrant. She handed the phone to Reeves, who read the message and immediately got on her radio. I want this number traced, now. Emily felt the weight settling back onto her shoulders, the brief moment of triumph giving way to reality. She'd just declared war on people with resources and connections she couldn't begin to match. What have I done? She whispered. Nash's hand found hers. You've done what needed to be done. Now we see it through. The television in Nash's room flickered to life. Someone had turned on the news. Emily's face filled the screen. The interview, already airing, her words clear and unwavering. They destroyed my career because I made them look incompetent. But I'm done being quiet. I'm done letting corrupt officers hide behind rank and classification. It's time for the truth. The screen cut to Morrison in the studio, her expression grave. This is an explosive allegation from a former Army combat medic who claims she was scapegoated to cover up a massive military corruption scandal. We've reached out to the Department of Defense for comment, but as of this broadcast, they have not responded. We'll continue to follow this story as it develops. Emily's hands were shaking again. The interview was out there now, irreversible, spreading across networks and social media, becoming part of the permanent record. Reeves's radio crackled. Captain, we've got a situation. Someone just tried to access the secure wing using forged credentials. Marines detained him at checkpoint 3. Who is he? Civilian contractor. Claims he was delivering medical supplies. But the supplies he's carrying aren't on any manifest, and his ID doesn't match our database. Nash sat up straighter despite his injuries. Get him to interrogation. I want to know who sent him. Emily's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call, not a text. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello? A voice she didn't recognize. Male. Calm. Ms. Carter, I represent certain interests that would prefer your testimony tomorrow not take place. We're prepared to offer you a substantial sum to reconsider. Emily's mouth went dry. Who is this? That's not important. What's important is that you understand the danger you're in. You've made powerful enemies, and we can make them go away. All you have to do is decline to testify. How much? A pause. $2 million. Deposited in an offshore account within 24 hours. Tax-free, untraceable. All we need is your cooperation. Emily's mind was racing. $2 million. Enough to disappear, start over somewhere far from all of this. Enough to never have to worry about money or safety or anything except living a quiet life. And if I refuse, she asked, then we can't guarantee your safety. Accidents happen, especially to people who make themselves targets. Emily looked at Nash, who was watching her with an expression that said he knew exactly what kind of call this was. She thought about the trashed apartment, the death threats, the years she'd already lost to fear and shame. Tell whoever you represent that they can take their $2 million and shove it, Emily said clearly. I'm testifying tomorrow, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. She hung up. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Nash smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. That was either the bravest thing I've ever heard or the stupidest. Probably both, Emily said, echoing Holloway's message. Reeves was already coordinating with her team, increasing security, running background checks on every person who'd had access to the secure wing in the last 12 hours. Emily's phone rang again, same unknown number. She answered on speaker this time. Miss Carter, I don't think you understand. No, you don't understand, Emily interrupted. I spent 3 years being afraid. Afraid of the truth, afraid of what people would think, afraid of standing up for myself. I'm done being afraid. So you can threaten me, you can offer me money, you can do whatever you want. I'm still showing up tomorrow, and I'm still telling the truth. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. She hung up again and turned off her phone. The room was silent except for the steady beep of Nash's monitors. Outside, she could hear boots in the corridor, voices on radios, the machinery of security clicking into high gear. They're going to come after you, Nash said quietly. Not just words and threats, real attempts. You know that, right? Yeah, I know. And you're still going through with this? Emily thought about all the people who'd been hurt by Vance and Webb and the others, the soldiers who'd died or been wounded because supplies were diverted, the careers destroyed to protect corruption, the truth buried under layers of classification and lies. I'm still going through with it, she said. Reeves returned with an update on the detained contractor. He's not talking, but we found something interesting in his supplies, not medical equipment, surveillance devices. Someone wanted eyes and ears inside this wing. How many did he plant before you caught him? Nash asked. Unknown. We're sweeping the entire floor, but if he's been here more than once... Reeves trailed off, the implication clear. They'd been listening, watching, gathering information to use against Emily and Nash, which meant someone knew exactly what they were planning. Emily's stomach turned. The hearing tomorrow is still happening, Reeves said firmly. We've moved it to a secure DOD facility, limited access, full military security. Nobody gets in without clearance that we verify personally. Can you guarantee it's safe? Reeves met her eyes. No, but it's the best we can do. That would have to be enough. The hours until dawn crawled by. Emily was moved to a different room every 90 minutes, never staying in one place long enough to be predictable. She tried to sleep but couldn't, her mind churning through everything that was coming, everything that could go wrong. At 0530 hours, Reeves knocked on her door. It's time. Hearing starts at 0800. Emily got dressed in clean clothes someone had retrieved from her apartment. Simple gray slacks and a white blouse. Professional without being formal. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 3 days ago, she'd been a floor nurse. Now she was about to testify before Congress about corruption that went straight to the Pentagon. Ready? Reeves asked from the doorway. Emily took a breath. No, but let's go anyway. The motorcade to the hearing was surreal. Armored vehicles, motorcycle escorts, helicopters overhead. Emily sat in the back of an SUV with Reeves and 2 other agents watching the city slide past through bulletproof glass. They arrived at the facility 40 minutes early. More security, more checkpoints, more armed personnel with expressions that said they were taking this seriously. Finally, Emily was led into a conference room where Kowalski was waiting with a team of lawyers and investigators. They ran through her testimony one more time, making sure she understood what questions to expect, what topics to avoid until formal charges were filed. At 07:55, a Marine opened the door. They're ready for you. Emily stood up, her legs steadier than she'd expected. Kowalski walked with her toward the hearing room, his expression encouraging. Just tell the truth, he said. That's all you have to do. The doors opened and Emily stepped into a room full of senators and representatives, cameras and recorders, the weight of institutional power pressed into every corner. She walked to the witness table and sat down. A senator she recognized from television, chairman of the Armed Services Committee, leaned into his microphone. Ms. Carter, you're here today to provide testimony regarding allegations of corruption and misconduct within military medical services. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Emily looked at the faces arrayed before her. Some skeptical, some curious, some already dismissive. She thought about Helmand Province, about the soldiers she'd saved and the ones she'd lost, about 7 years of carrying guilt that had never been hers to carry. "I do," she said. "Then let's begin. In your own words, Ms. Carter, tell us what happened." Emily took a breath, and then she started talking. She'd been speaking for maybe 10 minutes when the doors at the back of the room burst open. Military police poured in, weapons drawn, shouting for everyone to get down. At the witness table, Emily froze. A voice over a loudspeaker. "Active threat. Evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." Senators scrambled for exits. Cameras swung wildly. Someone grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her toward a side door, but in the chaos she lost her grip, stumbling backward. And through the confusion, she saw him. General Vance, standing in the doorway, flanked by armed men in uniforms she didn't recognize, his expression cold and controlled. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice carrying over the chaos, "you should have taken the money." The armed men beside Vance weren't military police. Emily saw that immediately. Their uniforms were close but wrong, patches slightly off, weapons held with the kind of casual confidence that came from private security work, not military discipline. The military police who'd burst in moments earlier were on the ground now, hands zip-tied, confusion written across their faces. Emily's legs locked. Every senator who'd been scrambling for exits had frozen, staring at the spectacle unfolding in the doorway. "General Vance," the committee chairman stammered, "what is the meaning of—" "Secure the room," Vance said, ignoring him completely. His eyes stayed fixed on Emily. "Ms. Carter and I are going to have a conversation. Everyone else stays quiet." One of Vance's men moved toward Emily. She stepped back, her hip hitting the witness table, hands instinctively coming up. The room erupted, senators shouting, aides reaching for phones, someone screaming for actual security. Then Kowalski stepped between Emily and the approaching guard, his FBI credentials held high. "General Vance, you are interfering with a federal investigation and congressional testimony. Stand down immediately." Vance's laugh was ugly. "Agent Kowalski, still pretending you have authority here." He pulled out a folded document from his jacket. "Executive order signed 2 hours ago. All investigations into military procurement irregularities are suspended pending national security review. Your case is closed." Kowalski's face went white. "That's not possible. The Attorney General would never—" "The Attorney General doesn't make decisions about military operations. And as of 0600 this morning, this investigation has been reclassified as a matter of national security requiring immediate containment." Vance's smile was cold. "Which means Ms. Carter's testimony is no longer admissible, and she's coming with me for debriefing." Emily's mind was racing. National security reclassification. Executive orders. Vance had more reach than they'd anticipated, connections high enough to shut down a federal investigation with a single phone call. But something didn't fit. The men with Vance weren't behaving like official military personnel, conducting a lawful operation. They were nervous, checking exits, hands too tight on their weapons. This wasn't official. This was desperation. "Show me the order," Emily said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Everyone turned to look at her. Vance's expression flickered, surprise, then annoyance. "Excuse me?" "The executive order. If it's legitimate, it'll have specific authorization codes, signatures, classification markers." Emily's hands were shaking, but her voice stayed level. "Show everyone here. Prove this is legal." Vance's jaw tightened. For 3 seconds, he didn't move. Then he gestured to one of his men, who brought the document forward and laid it on the witness table. Emily picked it up. The paper was good quality, the seal looked authentic, the signatures appeared correct. But the classification marker at the top was wrong, a designation that hadn't been used since 2019, replaced by updated protocols she'd learned about during her military service. "This is fake," she said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The classification code is outdated. Whoever forged this didn't know DoD updated their security protocols 4 years ago." The room went dead silent. Vance's expression darkened. "You're mistaken." "I'm not, and I can prove it." Emily looked at the committee chairman. "Senator Ortega, you have security-cleared staff here. Have them verify the document classification markers against current DoD standards." Ortega was already gesturing to an aide who rushed forward with a tablet. The aide scanned the document, cross-referenced databases, and her face went pale. "Senator, she's right. The classification code is from a deprecated system. This document couldn't have been issued this morning using current protocols. Every camera in the room swung toward Vance. His face had gone rigid, but Emily could see the calculation behind his eyes, weighing options, looking for exits. "You came here with forged documents and armed contractors," Emily said, stepping away from the table, forcing herself to stand straight despite her shaking legs. "This isn't a lawful military operation. This is a kidnapping attempt." One of Vance's men shifted his weapon slightly, not quite pointing it at anyone, but the threat was clear. Kowalski moved, pulling his own sidearm. "Everyone with General Vance, drop your weapons, now." The contractors exchanged glances. Their leader, a scarred man in his 40s with the look of someone who'd done private security in conflict zones, kept his rifle up, but his finger off the trigger. "We were told this was a legitimate extraction," he said to Vance. "You said DOD authorized it." "It is authorized," Vance snapped. "These people are interfering with—" "No." The contractor's voice was flat. "I've run enough ops to know what legal looks like. This isn't it." He lowered his weapon. "I'm out." The others followed his lead, setting rifles on the floor and stepping back with hands visible. The real military police, now being cut free by Senate security, immediately moved to secure Vance and his contractors. Vance's face twisted with rage. "You have no idea what you've done. The operations we run, the intelligence networks, the strategic advantages. You're compromising national security for some personal vendetta." "No," Emily said quietly. "I'm stopping you from burying more bodies to protect your career." Vance lunged toward her. He didn't make it 3 steps before MPs tackled him to the ground, forcing his arms behind his back. He was still shouting as they dragged him toward the door, words dissolving into incoherent fury. The room erupted again, senators demanding explanations, aides on phones, security personnel trying to restore order. Emily stood at the witness table, her whole body trembling with adrenaline crash, watching as the man who'd destroyed her career was hauled away in handcuffs. Senator Ortega was beside her suddenly, his hand on her shoulder. "Miss Carter, are you all right?" Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. "We're going to recess for 1 hour to sort this out, but I want you to know, your testimony will be heard. All of it." His expression was grim. "And we're going to get answers." The recess felt like underwater time, slow, distorted, sounds muffled. Emily was moved to a secure room where Kowalski and his team descended immediately, asking questions, taking statements, building their case. Through the window, she could see news vans multiplying outside the facility, reporters shouting questions at anyone who emerged. This was going to be everywhere. Not just the corruption allegations, but Vance's attempted kidnapping in front of Congress, the forged documents, the breakdown of a 2-star general in front of cameras. Reeves appeared in the doorway. "Commander Nash wants to talk to you. He's watching from Naval Medical. Saw the whole thing on the news feed." A staffer set up a secure video call. Nash's face appeared on screen, propped up in his hospital bed, looking exhausted but alive. "You just took down a general in front of the Senate," he said. "How do you feel?" "Terrified. Nauseous. Little bit like I'm hallucinating." Emily managed a weak smile. "How are you?" "Better than Vance." Nash's expression grew serious. "Listen, what you did in there, catching the forged classification code, that saved lives. If you'd gotten into a vehicle with those contractors, we might never have found you." Emily hadn't let herself think about that yet, about how close she'd come to disappearing into whatever black site or foreign country Vance had arranged. "How did he think he'd get away with it?" she asked. "He didn't. He was cornered, desperate, taking wild swings." Nash shifted in his bed, wincing. Web servers had everything: communications, financial records, kill orders. Vance knew the walls were closing in. This was his last play. And now? Now he's finished. No rank, no protection, no way to spin this. He'll face courts-martial for the corruption charges and federal prosecution for what happened today. Kowalski joined the call from his position beside Emily. "We've also identified the other officers in Webb's network. 6 arrests made in the last hour, 3 more pending. The entire operation is collapsing." Emily felt something loosening in her chest, a pressure she'd carried for so long it had become part of her baseline. "The soldiers from Helmand, the ones who died or were wounded because supplies got diverted, can their families get answers now?" "Yes," Kowalski said. And compensation. There'll be investigations, accountability boards, probably congressional hearings that make today look tame. He paused. But none of it happens without you. You understand that? Emily did. For 7 years, the truth had stayed buried because no one with direct knowledge was willing to speak up. She'd been the crack in the wall, the first person to stand in front of cameras and say the quiet part out loud. A knock at the door. Senator Ortega entered, followed by 2 other committee members. Ms. Carter, we're ready to resume. Are you prepared to continue your testimony? Every part of Emily wanted to say no, wanted to walk away, let the investigators handle it, go back to some semblance of normal life. But normal wasn't an option anymore. Maybe it never had been. I'm ready, she said. The hearing room was different when they reconvened. The earlier chaos had been replaced by rigid formality, every senator now fully aware they were part of something historic. The cameras were rolling, the gallery packed with press and legal observers. Emily sat at the witness table for the second time that morning. This time, no one interrupted. She talked for 3 hours. Helmand Province in exhaustive detail. The casualty counts, the missing supplies, the impossible decisions made under fire. She described the aftermath, the altered reports, the officers who'd visited her with sympathetic faces and promises that investigations would be thorough. The slow realization that no investigation was coming, that her career was being quietly dismantled while she was blamed for failures that weren't hers. She talked about Webb's team at Riverside Memorial, about Nash's convoy ambush, about the network of corruption that had operated unchecked for years. And she talked about the soldiers, the ones she'd saved and the ones she couldn't, the ones who'd gone home broken and the ones who hadn't gone home at all. When she finished, the room was silent except for the quiet whir of cameras. Senator Ortega leaned into his microphone. Ms. Carter, on behalf of this committee, I want to apologize. What was done to you was unconscionable. The military failed you, and this Congress failed to provide proper oversight to prevent these abuses. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. But I also want to thank you. Your courage today has exposed systematic corruption that would have continued unchecked. Because of you, changes will be made. Lives will be saved. Emily didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded. The hearing adjourned. Emily was escorted out through a side entrance, avoiding the press scrum, and taken back to Naval Medical Center where a different kind of chaos was waiting. Her phone had 847 missed calls. The hospital switchboard had been flooded with media requests. Holloway had called 6 times. Her old Army unit had tracked her down through veteran networks, asking if she needed support. 3 different law firms had sent offers to represent her pro bono. And buried in the flood of messages, one text from an unknown number that made Emily's blood run cold. Vance was just the visible piece. We're still out here. Watch your back. She showed it to Reeves, who'd been her constant shadow since returning from the hearing. Reeves read it without expression. We'll trace it. But honestly, it doesn't matter. How does a death threat not matter? Because whoever sent this is posturing. The network's broken. Webb and Vance are in custody. The other officers are being arrested. Their financial networks are frozen. Reeves's voice was certain. All that's left are the foot soldiers, and they know there's no money and no protection coming. They'll disappear rather than risk exposure. Emily wanted to believe that, but she'd seen how deep this went. How many people had been complicit in maintaining the system? How long until I can go home? She asked. Your apartment's still a crime scene, but we're working on getting you into temporary housing, somewhere secure. Reeves paused. Though I have a feeling you'll have options soon. What do you mean? Reeves pulled out her phone and showed Emily a news article that had posted 20 minutes ago. Riverside Memorial Hospital announces new Director of Emergency Medicine, Emily Carter, to lead trauma services expansion. Emily stared at the headline. I didn't apply for that position. Board voted unanimously 2 hours ago. Dr. Holloway recommended you personally, and after today's testimony, they fast-tracked the appointment. Reeves smiled slightly. Comes with a substantial raise, your own team, and final authority over trauma protocols. It was everything Emily had never let herself want. Not just vindication, but advancement, recognition. The kind of position that would let her build something real, implement the lessons she'd learned in combat, create systems that saved lives instead of just responding to crises. I need to talk to Holloway, she said. The call connected immediately. Holloway's voice was warm, almost giddy. Please tell me you saw the news. I saw it. What were you thinking? I was thinking that I just watched you take down a corrupt general and testify before Congress without breaking a sweat. I was thinking that you have more emergency medicine experience than anyone I've ever worked with. And I was thinking that Riverside Memorial just got very lucky. He paused. Unless you're turning it down. Emily looked around the secure room at Naval Medical, the guards outside, the reinforced walls, the reality of what her life had become in 72 hours. She thought about going back to being a floor nurse, keeping her head down, staying small. That version of herself felt like a stranger now. I'll take it, she said, but I have conditions. Name them. I want to build a combat medicine training program. Partner with VA hospitals. Bring in veterans who are struggling with transition. Give them jobs and purpose. Done. I want final say on personnel. No administrators overruling my medical decisions. You'll have it. And I want everything documented. Procedures, protocols, outcomes. If this works, I want it replicable at other hospitals. Holloway was quiet for a moment, then, you're not just building a department, are you? You're building a model. Someone needs to. And it might as well be someone who knows what it costs when the system fails. When can you start? Emily looked at Reeves, who was listening with an approving expression. 2 weeks. I need to finish cooperating with the investigation first. We'll hold the position, and Emily? Holloway's voice softened. I'm sorry it took something this dramatic for us to see what was right in front of us all along. So am I. But we're past it now. The call ended. Emily sat back, feeling the weight of the new responsibility settling onto shoulders that had carried nothing but shame for years. It was heavy, but it was a different kind of heavy. Purpose instead of guilt. Reeves's radio crackled. Captain, you need to come to interrogation. Vance is asking to speak with Ms. Carter. Emily and Reeves exchanged glances. Is he allowed to do that? Emily asked. He can ask. You can refuse. Emily thought about it. Part of her wanted nothing to do with Vance ever again, wanted to let him rot in whatever cell they'd put him in. But another part, the part that had just spent 3 hours detailing his crimes for Congress, wanted to look him in the eye one more time. I'll talk to him, she said. The interrogation room was exactly what Emily had expected. Concrete walls, metal table, the smell of industrial cleaner. Vance sat on one side in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists cuffed to the table. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without his uniform and rank. 2 FBI agents stood against the wall. Reeves positioned herself beside Emily, hand near her sidearm. Vance looked up when Emily entered. His expression was unreadable. You wanted to talk, Emily said, staying standing. Talk. I wanted to apologize. That wasn't what Emily had expected. She waited. Not for the Helmand operation. That was necessary, given the strategic constraints we were operating under. And not for protecting the procurement network, because that funding saved lives in ways you'll never understand. Vance's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was briefing subordinates. But I'm sorry you became collateral damage. That wasn't personal. Emily felt anger rising in her chest, hot and sharp. 83 soldiers survived in Helmand because I wouldn't quit. You buried that and destroyed my career so you wouldn't face accountability. How is that not personal? Because you were a junior medic who got in the way of larger operations. You were a problem that needed to be managed. Vance leaned forward as much as the cuffs allowed. You want to believe this is about good and evil, about corruption versus integrity, but it's more complicated than that. The money we diverted funded black operations that prevented attacks, saved American lives, maintained strategic advantages. Sometimes the rules have to bend. People died because supplies didn't reach where they were needed, Emily said quietly. Soldiers I could have saved if I'd had the equipment you signed off on, but never delivered. There's nothing complicated about that. And hundreds more lived because of intelligence we gathered with that funding. You see one battlefield. I saw the whole war. Emily moved closer to the table, close enough to see the lines around Vance's eyes, the gray at his temples, the absolute conviction in his expression that he'd done nothing wrong. You really believe that, don't you? That your crimes were justified? I believe I made hard choices in impossible situations, just like you did in Helmand. Vance's smile was bitter. We're not that different, Carter. You broke protocols to save lives. I broke protocols to win a war. The only difference is you got caught on the wrong side of the paperwork. No, Emily said. The difference is I took responsibility for my choices. You blamed other people for yours. Vance's expression hardened. You'll never understand the weight of command, the decisions that have to be made when there are no good options. You operated at the tactical level, saving individual soldiers. I operated strategically, protecting national interests. And Webb, selling mission routes to insurgents who killed our own people? That was strategic too? For the first time, Vance's mask cracked. Webb went rogue. That wasn't sanctioned. But you protected him, used him, let him run operations because they were profitable and you needed the money to flow. Emily leaned down, her hands on the table. You can dress it up however you want, General, but at the end of the day, you sold out the people you were supposed to protect. And now you're in here while I'm out there building something that actually saves lives. She straightened up, ready to leave. They'll come for you, Vance said quietly. The ones who got away, the officers who weren't named, the contractors who disappeared, the foreign contacts who lost their revenue stream. You think this is over, but it's just starting. Emily met his eyes. Let them come. I spent 3 years running from ghosts. I'm done running. She walked out without looking back. In the corridor outside, Reeves was waiting. How do you feel? Like I just talked to someone who'll die believing he was the hero of his own story. Emily took a breath, steadying herself. But that's not my problem anymore. They walked through Naval Medical's corridors, past Marines standing guard and nurses going about their rounds. Emily's phone buzzed, a text from Nash. Heard you talk to Vance. You good? Emily typed back. Better than him. The response was immediate. Always have been. A nurse Emily recognized from Riverside Memorial was in the hallway, picking up a patient chart. She did a double take when she saw Emily. Oh my God, you're her! The nurse from the news. The woman's eyes were wide. Is it true what they're saying about you saving all those soldiers? Emily felt Reeves's slight tension beside her, ready to intervene if needed. But the nurse's expression wasn't hostile or suspicious. It was something else. Admiration. It's true, Emily said quietly. But I wasn't alone. There were a lot of people who kept fighting when it would have been easier to quit. The nurse nodded slowly. I'm Sarah. I work in the ER at Riverside. Started there 6 months ago. She paused, seeming to gather courage. They're all talking about the new trauma director position, about what you're planning to build. I just wanted to say, if you're looking for people who want to be part of that, I'd love to apply. Emily felt something shift, a glimpse of the future taking shape. Send your resume to Dr. Holloway. Tell him I recommended you. Sarah's face lit up. Really? Really, we're going to need good people. After Sarah hurried off, Reeves smiled. You're going to change how emergency medicine works, aren't you? I'm going to try. Emily looked down at her hands, the same hands that had performed battlefield surgery under fire, that had saved Nash's life in a trauma bay, that had held a pistol against armed contractors. For 7 years, I let other people define what I was capable of. I'm done with that. They reached Nash's room. He was awake, sitting up more comfortably now, color fully returned to his face. A doctor was reviewing his charts, nodding approvingly at the progress. Clean bill of health? Emily asked. Getting there. They're talking about discharge in 3 days if infection doesn't set in. Nash gestured to the television mounted on the wall. You're on every channel. They're calling you the nurse who took down the Pentagon. Emily winced. That's not... It's accurate. You exposed corruption that went straight to senior leadership. There are already calls for a full audit of DoD procurement going back a decade. Nash's expression grew serious. But Vance was right about one thing. There are people still out there who benefited from this system. Some of them are powerful, and they're not going to appreciate the scrutiny. Reeves already gave me the speech about ongoing threats. This isn't a speech. This is reality. Nash shifted in the bed. For the next few months, maybe longer, you're going to need security. Real security, not just hospital guards. I can't live like that. You might not have a choice. Before Emily could respond, Kowalski appeared in the doorway with 2 other agents. His expression was carefully neutral, which immediately set off alarms. "What happened?" Emily asked. "We traced the threatening text you received earlier. Burner phone, but we tracked the location it was sent from." Kowalski pulled out his tablet. "It came from inside Riverside Memorial Hospital." Emily's blood went cold. "Someone at the hospital sent that? Or someone who had access to the building? We're pulling security footage now." Kowalski's voice was careful. "Ms. Carter, I need to ask, is there anyone at Riverside who might have reason to threaten you? Anyone connected to Vance or Webb?" Emily thought about the hundreds of people who worked at Riverside. Doctors, nurses, staff, administrators. Any one of them could have connections she didn't know about. "I don't know," she admitted. "I worked there 3 years and barely talked to anyone outside my department. We're going to need access to personnel records, background checks on everyone hired in the last 5 years. This is a potential active threat." The implications were sinking in. Someone at the hospital where Emily would soon be working, someone who walked the same halls, used the same break rooms, had access to patient information and building layouts, had sent a death threat. And Emily had just accepted a position that would put her there every day. "You're thinking about backing out of the director position," Nash said, reading her expression. "I'm thinking that someone wants me to." Reeves was already on her phone, coordinating with FBI and hospital security. "We'll lock down Riverside, sweep every department, interview staff. Nobody operates there without full clearance." "That'll take weeks," Emily said. "Then it takes weeks." Kowalski's voice was firm. "Your safety isn't negotiable." Emily looked at Nash, who was watching her with an expression that said he understood exactly what she was thinking. That backing down now, letting threats dictate her choices, was exactly what Vance and the others wanted. That fear was a weapon they'd already used against her once. "No," she said. "We don't delay. I start in 2 weeks like planned." "Emily," Reeves started. "With full security measures in place," Emily continued. "Background checks on my direct team, controlled access to my office, whatever protocols you think are necessary. But I'm not letting anonymous threats stop me from doing the job." Kowalski studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, but you follow every security guideline we establish. No exceptions." "Agreed." After Kowalski left to coordinate with hospital security, Emily sat down heavily in the chair beside Nash's bed. The adrenaline that had carried her through the day was finally wearing off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "You could have said yes to the delay," Nash said quietly. "No one would have blamed you." "I would have blamed me." Emily looked at her hands again, still steady despite everything. "I spent 3 years being small and scared. I'm not going back to that, even if it's safer." Nash smiled. "Good, because the world needs people who refuse to back down." Emily's phone buzzed. Another message, this one from Holloway. "FBI just called. They're sweeping the hospital." "What happened?" Emily typed back. "Someone at Riverside sent me a threat. They're being cautious." The response came quickly. "Good. I want you safe. We'll cooperate fully with the investigation." Then another message. "P.S. Your office is being renovated. What color do you want the walls?" Despite everything, Emily laughed. The normalcy of the question, "What color do you want the walls?" felt absurd against the backdrop of federal investigations and death threats and generals being arrested. But it was also grounding, a reminder that life continued, that there were still mundane decisions to make and ordinary work to do. "Blue," she typed back, "light blue. Like scrubs." Over the next week, Emily lived in a strange limbo between her old life and whatever came next. She stayed in secured housing at Naval Medical, gave depositions to federal prosecutors building cases against Vance and the other officers, and worked with Holloway remotely to build the framework for Riverside's new trauma program. The FBI investigation at the hospital turned up 3 staff members with concerning connections. One nurse whose brother had worked for Webb's private security firm, a custodial worker with unexplained cash deposits, and an administrator who'd falsified his background check. All 3 were placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. The threatening text was traced to the nurse's brother, who'd been paid to send it by an intermediary whose trail went cold in the Cayman Islands. Emily's security team deemed the immediate threat neutralized but recommended ongoing protective measures. Nash was discharged on day 6, moving to a rehabilitation facility where he could recover without the intensive medical supervision. Emily visited him there, bringing coffee and updates on the investigation. "They're fast-tracking the courts-martial," he told her. "Vance and 4 other officers. Military prosecutors want public trials. Make an example." "Will you testify?" "Probably, but the case is solid even without me. Web servers had everything: recorded conversations, financial transfers, operational orders. It's all documented." Emily sipped her coffee. "What are you going to do after you're cleared for active duty?" Nash considered the question. "I've got 23 years in. Could retire, take a consulting position somewhere quiet." He smiled. "Or I could stay in, try to fix the system from inside." "That sounds exhausting." "It does, doesn't it?" Nash looked out the window of his room, watching Marines training on the grounds below. "But someone has to, and I'm too stubborn to quit." Emily understood that. She was beginning to realize stubbornness was its own kind of strength. On day 12, Holloway called with news. "We're ready for you. Office is set up, your team is assembled, and we've implemented every security protocol the FBI recommended. You can start whenever you're ready." Emily looked around the secure housing unit that had been her home for almost 2 weeks. It was comfortable but sterile, the kind of place designed for temporary stays. "I'll be there Monday," she said. The weekend felt longer than the previous 12 days combined. Emily packed what few belongings she'd acquired, coordinated with her security team, and tried to prepare mentally for what came next. Sunday night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the congressional hearing, Vance's face when the forged document was exposed, the moment everything she'd buried for 7 years finally came into the light. At 0300, she gave up on sleep and made coffee. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Emily's heart jumped, but when she opened it, the message was different from the threats. "My name is Marcus Riley. I was one of the soldiers you saved in Helmand. I just watched your congressional testimony. Thank you for finally telling the truth. You saved my life, and I never forgot you." Emily stared at the message, tears blurring her vision. She typed back with shaking hands. "Thank you for letting me know. It means everything." More messages came through that night. 7 more soldiers from Helmand, all reaching out to say the same thing. They remembered, they'd survived, and they were grateful. By the time dawn broke, Emily had a list of names and faces she'd thought she'd failed. Proof that the guilt she'd carried wasn't earned. Monday morning, Emily walked into Riverside Memorial Hospital for the first time in 2 weeks. The entrance was different. Security checkpoints, armed guards, new protocols implemented after the attack. Staff she passed stared openly, some with curiosity, others with respect. Holloway met her in the lobby, grinning. "Welcome back, Director Carter." The title still felt strange. Emily followed him through corridors she'd walked countless times as a floor nurse, past apartments where she'd been invisible for 3 years. Now people nodded as she passed, some calling out congratulations. Her new office was on the 4th floor, overlooking the trauma bay where she'd saved Nash's life. The walls were painted light blue, just like she'd requested. Her desk was already set up with a computer, secure phone lines, and a nameplate that read, "Emily Carter, Director of Emergency Medicine." "Your team is assembled in Conference Room B," Holloway said. "Whenever you're ready." Emily took a breath, looking out the window at the city beyond. Somewhere out there, federal prosecutors were building cases. Soldiers were healing. A corrupt system was being dismantled piece by piece. And she was here, about to lead a team, implement programs, save lives. "I'm ready," she said. The conference room held 12 people, a mix of doctors, nurses, EMTs, and administrative staff. Sarah, the nurse who'd approached Emily at Naval Medical, was there, sitting up straight with nervous excitement. Emily stood at the head of the table, looking at faces that ranged from eager to skeptical. "I'm Emily Carter," she began, "and I'm not going to pretend I got this position through conventional channels. Most of you know what happened. You've seen the news, read the articles, heard the stories." She paused, meeting each person's eyes. "What you might not know is that for the last 3 years, I've worked in this hospital as a floor nurse. I've seen how we operate, where we succeed, and where we fail. I've watched patients die who shouldn't have, seen staff burn out because systems don't support them, and watched talented people leave because they weren't valued. A few nods around the table. People who'd experienced the same frustrations. We're going to change that, not overnight and not without resistance, but we're going to build something better. A trauma program that doesn't just react to crises, but prevents them. That trains people for the worst scenarios they'll face. That values every team member from the EMT to the attending physician. Emily pulled out a folder, laying out program proposals on the table. This is what I'm proposing: combat medicine integration, veteran hiring initiatives, advanced trauma protocols, mandatory mental health support for staff. It's aggressive, it's expensive, and it's going to make some people uncomfortable. The lead trauma surgeon, Dr. Patricia Hayes, leaned forward. The board approved all this? They approved the framework. We have 6 months to prove it works. Emily smiled slightly. Which means we don't have time to waste. For the next 2 hours, they worked through details, assigned responsibilities, debated approaches. Emily felt herself slipping into a rhythm she recognized, coordinating a team under pressure, making decisions with incomplete information, trusting people to execute their roles. It felt like being back in Helmand, except this time she had resources and authority instead of improvising in a war zone. When the meeting ended, Sarah approached. Director Carter, I just wanted to say thank you for recommending me. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Emily paused. And it's just Emily. We're a team, not a hierarchy. Sarah nodded, smiling, and headed out. Emily was gathering her notes when Dr. Hayes stayed behind. The older surgeon had a reputation for being tough but fair, someone who'd survived 30 years in emergency medicine without burning out. You handled that well, Hayes said. But you should know, there are people in this hospital who aren't happy about your appointment. Some think you're unqualified. Others think you're a political stunt. You're going to face resistance. I know. Good, because they're going to test you, try to undermine your authority, question your decisions, make your job harder than it needs to be. Hayes's expression was serious. But if you're half as stubborn as you seemed in that hearing, you'll be fine. Emily smiled. Stubbornness is kind of my specialty. Hayes left, and Emily was alone in the conference room. She looked at her notes, the program proposals, the 6-month timeline they'd established. It was ambitious, maybe impossible, but for the first time in 7 years, Emily wasn't afraid of impossible. Her phone buzzed, a text from Nash. How'd the first day go? Emily typed back, better than getting shot at. That's a low bar. I'll take my victories where I can find them. She was walking back to her office when Reeves appeared in the corridor, looking tense. We have a problem, the captain said quietly. Emily's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? The custodial worker we put on leave, the one with the unexplained cash deposits, he disappeared yesterday, missed his scheduled FBI interview, and his apartment's been cleared out. You think he ran? I think someone warned him we were closing in. Reeves's voice was carefully controlled, which means there's still a leak. Someone inside Riverside with connections to Vance's network, and they're actively interfering with the investigation. Emily looked around the corridor, nurses walking past, doctors checking charts, staff going about their daily routines. Any one of them could be the leak. Anyone could be watching her right now, reporting back to whoever was still operating in the shadows. What do we do? She asked. We set a trap. Reeves's expression was cold. You're going to feed specific information to different people on your team. False information, each version slightly different. Then we wait to see which version shows up where it shouldn't. You want me to lie to my own staff? I want to catch whoever's trying to sabotage you before they succeed. Reeves met her eyes. Can you do that? Emily thought about the message spray-painted on her apartment wall, about Vance's attempted kidnapping, about the system that had spent 7 years protecting itself by destroying anyone who threatened it. Yeah, she said, I can do that. What Emily didn't say, what she was only beginning to understand, was that she was good at it. Good at reading people, at detecting threats, at operating in hostile environments. 7 years ago, those skills had kept soldiers alive in a war zone. Now they were going to help her navigate something just as dangerous. And somewhere in the hospital, the person who'd sent that threatening text, the person who thought they could intimidate her into backing down, was about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. Emily spent the next 3 days building the trap with surgical precision. She divided her team into 4 groups, each receiving slightly different information about a fictional security upgrade. New badge systems, revised access protocols, camera placements that didn't actually exist. The variations were subtle but traceable, each one marked with unique details that would identify the source if they leaked. She hated it, hated lying to people who were working hard to build something good. But Reeves was right. Someone in the hospital was actively sabotaging them, and that person needed to be identified before they could do real damage. On the fourth day, Reeves appeared in Emily's office at 700 hours with a grim expression. "We got a hit. Someone accessed the hospital's security server last night using stolen credentials and pulled files on the new badge system." She laid a printout on Emily's desk. "The specific details match what you told Dr. Marcus Jennings." Emily's stomach turned. Jennings was the senior resident she'd assigned to coordinate with emergency services. Young, ambitious, seemingly dedicated to the new program. "Are you sure?" "The access logs are definitive." He logged in at 2:17 a.m. from an off-site location, downloaded the files, and transmitted them to an encrypted email address we're still tracing. Reeves paused. "There's more. We pulled his phone records. He's been in regular contact with a number registered to one of Webb's former contractors." Emily sat back in her chair, processing. "How long has he been feeding them information?" "At least 3 weeks, maybe longer. We're reviewing all his communications now. What do you need from me?" "Nothing. FBI is taking over from here. They'll arrest him quietly, use him to trace the network back to whoever's paying." Reeves's expression softened slightly. "You did good work, Emily. This could have gone on for months if you hadn't caught it." But Emily didn't feel good. She felt sick, remembering Jennings' enthusiasm during team meetings, his smart questions about trauma protocols, the way he'd volunteered for extra shifts to learn the new systems. All of it performance. All of it designed to get close enough to gather intelligence. "Did he ever pose a direct threat?" Emily asked quietly. "Not that we can prove, but he had access to patient records, staff schedules, building layouts. If someone wanted to target you specifically, he could have provided everything they needed." Emily thought about walking through the hospital corridors, eating in the cafeteria, working late in her office. All the moments when she'd been vulnerable, thinking she was safe in her own workplace. Jennings had been watching the entire time. "When are you moving on him?" "Today. Within the hour." Reeves stood. "I wanted you to know first. You'll need to reassign his responsibilities, and there'll be questions from the team." After Reeves left, Emily sat alone in her office, staring at the printouts. She'd been right to set the trap, right to protect the program and her team. But it didn't make the betrayal hurt less. A knock at the door. Sarah entered, carrying coffee and looking concerned. "You okay? You've been in here since dawn." Emily managed a smile. "Just paperwork. Never ends." "Well, take a break. We've got the first training session with the VA hospital in an hour, and people are excited." Sarah set the coffee down. "This thing you're building, it's real, Emily. People are starting to believe it's actually going to work." Emily looked at Sarah's honest, open face and felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper. People were counting on her. The program, the partnerships, the careers she was helping rebuild, all of it rested on her ability to keep pushing forward despite the threats and betrayals. "Thanks for the coffee," Emily said. "I'll be ready." The training session was held in Riverside's largest conference room, packed with medical personnel from 3 different facilities. Emily stood at the front, presenting trauma protocols adapted from battlefield medicine, and watched as doctors and nurses who'd never considered military techniques started asking questions, taking notes, getting excited about the possibilities. Halfway through, FBI agents moved through the hospital corridors outside, arresting Jennings as he arrived for his shift. Emily saw it happen through the conference room's glass wall. Jennings' shocked face, the handcuffs, the way other staff members stopped to stare. She kept talking, didn't miss a beat in her presentation. But inside she was counting the cost of everything that had brought them to this moment. After the session ended, Dr. Hayes approached. "I saw them take Jennings. What happened?" "He was leaking information to people outside the hospital. FBI has evidence." Hayes' expression darkened. "Damn, I recommended him for your team." "You couldn't have known." Still, Hayes looked toward the corridor where Jennings had been escorted away. "Makes you wonder who else might be compromised." That was the question that kept Emily awake at night. How deep did the corruption go? How many people were still operating in the shadows, protecting the system that had destroyed her career? Her phone buzzed, a text from Kowalski. Jennings is cooperating. Gave us names, locations, payment records. We're moving on the entire network within 48 hours. This might finally be over. Emily wanted to believe that. But she'd learned the hard way that systems this corrupt didn't die easily. The next 48 hours felt like waiting for a storm to break. Emily went through the motions, meetings, program development, staff coordination, while FBI operations unfolded in the background. Kowalski kept her updated. 7 arrests across 4 states, financial accounts frozen, safe houses raided. The network was bigger than they'd anticipated. Contractors, logistics officers, even 2 congressmen who'd been receiving payments in exchange for blocking oversight legislation. Webb and Vance's operation had metastasized over years, becoming so embedded in military and political structures that rooting it out required coordination between FBI, DOD investigators, and Treasury Department forensic accountants. On day 2, Nash called. "Turn on the news." Emily pulled up a news site on her computer. The headline made her breath catch. Military corruption scandal expands. Dozens arrested in nationwide operation. General Vance implicated in decade-long scheme. Below it, photos of officers being led away in handcuffs. Congressional hearings announced. Pentagon officials resigning. The story was everywhere. Not just news outlets, but social media, military forums, veteran networks. People who'd been victimized by the system were coming forward, sharing stories that echoed Emily's own. "It's really happening," Emily said quietly. "It's really happening," Nash confirmed. "And it's because you refuse to stay quiet." That evening, Emily received a call from Senator Ortega's office. The committee wanted her to testify again, this time in open session, with media present. A formal acknowledgement of what had been done to her, a public apology on behalf of the military and Congress. "When?" Emily asked. "Next week. They're calling it an accountability hearing. Vance and 6 other officers will be present, forced to face testimony from the people they victimized." Emily thought about sitting in the same room as Vance again, about facing him publicly while the world watched. Part of her didn't want to, wanted to be done with all of it, move on with her life and the work at Riverside. But another part, the part that had spent 7 years believing she'd failed, knew this was necessary. Not just for her, but for everyone who'd been scapegoated and silenced. "I'll be there," she said. The week leading up to the hearing was chaos. Media requests flooded in, legal teams wanted prep sessions, the hospital board kept calling with concerns about publicity. Emily dealt with it all while still running her department, still implementing programs, still showing up every day to do the work. On the night before the hearing, she couldn't sleep. She walked through Riverside's corridors at 300, past darkened offices and quiet patient rooms, thinking about everything that had changed in a month. She found herself in the trauma bay where she'd saved Nash's life. The space was empty now, cleaned and restocked, waiting for the next emergency. Emily stood there remembering the blood, the chaos, the moment when she'd stopped being invisible and stepped into the light. Couldn't sleep either? Emily turned to find Doctor Hayes in the doorway, still in scrubs from a late surgery. "Too much noise in my head," Emily admitted. Hayes walked over, studying the trauma bay with a surgeon's eye. "This is where it started, isn't it? Where you stopped hiding." "I wasn't hiding. I was just—" "Yes, you were. We all saw it. The way you kept your head down, never pushed back, never claimed credit for good work." Hayes's voice was gentle but firm. "You were hiding from something. And then Commander Nash showed up and you didn't have that option anymore." Emily didn't argue. It was true. "You know what I think?" Hayes continued. "I think you were always this person. The one who leads, who fights, who refuses to quit. You just forgot for a while. 7 years is a long time to forget. And yet here you are, about to testify before Congress again, running a department, changing how we practice medicine." Hayes smiled. "That's not forgetting. That's remembering who you really are." Emily felt something loosening in her chest, a knot she hadn't realized was still there. "What if I can't keep it up? What if I fail?" "Then you fail. And you get back up and try again, just like you did in Helmand when everything was falling apart." Hayes put a hand on Emily's shoulder. The difference between you and Vance is that you're not afraid to be wrong. You're not protecting an image or a reputation. You're just trying to save lives and do good work. That's enough. After Hayes left, Emily stood alone in the trauma bay for another hour, thinking about soldiers in Helmand, about Nash bleeding out on a gurney, about Jennings's betrayal and Vance's rage, and all the people who tried to make her small. She thought about the life she'd built as a floor nurse, quiet, contained, safe from scrutiny. And she thought about the life she was building now, public, demanding, constantly under pressure, but also meaningful in ways the old life never was. At some point, she'd stopped trying to be invisible, and the world hadn't ended. The hearing was scheduled for 1,000 hours. Emily arrived at 0900, escorted by Reeves and a security team, and was led through corridors packed with media and protesters. Some were veterans supporting her. Others held signs condemning corruption. A few shouted that she was lying, that Vance was being railroaded. Inside the hearing room, the atmosphere was different from the first session, more formal, more crowded, cameras positioned for maximum coverage. And sitting at a table across from where Emily would testify, General Vance and 6 other officers, all in civilian clothes, all wearing expressions that ranged from defiant to resigned. Senator Ortega called the room to order. This hearing is convened to address systematic corruption within military procurement and medical services, and to hear testimony from individuals who were harmed by this corruption. Ms. Emily Carter, please take the stand. Emily walked to the witness table, her legs steady, her hands calm. She'd done this before. She could do it again. Ms. Carter, you've already provided extensive testimony about the events in Helmand Province and the subsequent cover-up. Today, we want to give you the opportunity to address those responsible directly. Ortega gestured to Vance and the other officers. These men orchestrated a scheme that destroyed careers, diverted resources, and cost lives. What would you like to say to them? Emily looked at Vance. He stared back, his face a mask of contempt. She could have said a lot of things, could have detailed every way they'd hurt her, every night she'd spent questioning herself, every opportunity she'd lost, could have demanded apologies, explanations, acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused. Instead, she said, I want you to know that you failed. Vance's expression flickered. You tried to bury the truth about Helmand Province, and it came out anyway. You tried to silence me, and I'm testifying before Congress. You tried to maintain a system built on corruption, and it's collapsing around you. Emily's voice was steady. Everything you did to protect yourselves, the altered reports, the falsified records, the intimidation, all of it failed. And the reason it failed is because you underestimated the people you victimized. You thought we'd stay quiet, that we'd accept your version of events, that we'd be too scared or too broken to fight back. She paused, meeting each officer's eyes in turn. But we didn't stay quiet. We found each other. We gathered evidence. We stood up and told the truth. And now you're sitting here in front of the world, exposed and accountable, while we're out there rebuilding what you tried to destroy. Vance's hands were clenched on the table. One of the other officers, a colonel Emily didn't recognize, was staring at the floor. So no, I don't want your apologies. I don't need them. What I need is for everyone watching this to understand that systems like yours only work when good people stay silent. And we're done being silent. The room was absolutely quiet. Then, from the gallery, someone started clapping. Others joined. Within seconds, half the room was applauding, including several of the senators. Ortega let it continue for a moment before calling for order. Thank you, Ms. Carter. General Vance, do you have anything to say in response? Vance stood slowly, his face red. Ms. Carter is a naive idealist who doesn't understand the complexities of modern warfare. The decisions we made were illegal, Senator Ortega interrupted, were corrupt, and have resulted in criminal charges against you and your co-conspirators. You can save your justifications for your court-martial. He looked at Emily. Ms. Carter, this committee wants to formally acknowledge the injustice done to you. Your military record will be amended to reflect the truth of what happened in Helmand Province. Additionally, we're recommending a full review of every personnel action taken during the time period in question to identify and rectify similar cases. Emily felt tears threatening but held them back. Thank you, Senator. We also want to present you with this. Ortega held up a framed document. a congressional commendation for extraordinary service in combat and exceptional courage in exposing corruption. It's not enough to make up for what was taken from you, but it's a start. Emily accepted the commendation with shaking hands. The applause started again, louder this time. Vance was still standing, his face twisted with rage. "This is political theater. None of you understand." "Sit down, General," Ortega said coldly. "You've done enough damage." Vance sat, but his eyes stayed on Emily, burning with hatred. She met his gaze without flinching. He'd tried to destroy her, tried to silence her, tried to make her believe she was nothing. He'd failed. The hearing continued for 3 more hours, other victims testifying about their experiences with the corruption network. Emily listened to soldiers who'd been denied medical care, medics who'd been blamed for equipment failures, families who'd lost loved ones because supplies never arrived. Each story reinforced what she'd known. This wasn't about her. It was about a system that had sacrificed people to protect power, and about those people finally getting justice. When the hearing adjourned, Emily was swarmed by media and well-wishers. Reeves and her security team managed to extract her, getting her to a secure vehicle while reporters shouted questions. In the car, Emily looked at the congressional commendation, the official language, the seal, the signature, physical proof that her version of events was now the official record. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nash. "Watch the whole thing. You destroyed him." Emily typed back. "We destroyed him. Together." "Damn right we did." "Beer when you get back?" "Make it coffee. I have work in the morning." The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of activity. The courts-martial moved forward with military efficiency, Vance and the other officers facing charges that would likely result in decades of prison time. Webb, facing both military and federal charges, attempted to negotiate a plea deal but found prosecutors uninterested in leniency. Emily's program at Riverside grew rapidly, attracting attention from hospitals nationwide. Veterans she'd never met contacted her wanting to join the team. Medical schools started incorporating combat trauma protocols into their curriculum. The VA began partnering with civilian hospitals using her model. But the biggest change was internal. Emily stopped second-guessing herself, stopped waiting for permission to lead, stopped apologizing for taking up space. When administrators pushed back on funding, she pushed harder. When old guard physicians resisted new protocols, she presented data until they couldn't argue. When media wanted to focus on the scandal, she redirected them to the work being done. She wasn't trying to be perfect. She made mistakes, lost her temper in meetings, occasionally doubted whether she was qualified for the responsibility. But she didn't let those moments stop her from moving forward. 3 months after the hearing, Emily was in her office reviewing quarterly data when Holloway appeared in the doorway. "Got a minute?" "For you?" "Always." Emily gestured to a chair. Holloway sat down, looking pleased with himself. "I just got off the phone with the hospital board. They're fully funding the trauma program expansion, new equipment, additional staff, dedicated training facility, everything you asked for." Emily felt a smile spreading across her face. "Everything?" "Everything. They're also creating 5 new positions for veteran medical personnel. You'll have final approval on all hires." "That's incredible." "It gets better. 3 other hospitals have contacted us wanting to implement similar programs. They want you to consult, help them build their own versions." Holloway leaned back. "Emily, you're changing the field. Not just here, but everywhere." Emily looked out her office window at the city beyond. Somewhere out there, veterans were struggling to transition back to civilian life. Medics were questioning whether their skills had value outside combat zones. Nurses were wondering if they could do more than their current positions allowed. And now, because she'd refused to stay quiet, they had proof that the answer was yes. "I want to do the consultations," she said, "but I'm not leaving Riverside. This is home." "Wouldn't dream of asking you to leave. We'll make it work remotely. Occasional site visits." Holloway stood. "You've earned this, Emily. All of it." After he left, Emily sat quietly with the news. 3 months ago, she'd been a floor nurse trying to hide from her past. Now she was directing a department, consulting nationally, building something that would outlast her. The transformation should have felt impossible, but it didn't. It felt like finally becoming who she'd always been underneath the fear and shame. Her phone rang. Unknown number, but Emily answered anyway. She'd stopped being afraid of unknown calls. "Is this Emily Carter?" Speaking. "My name is Jessica Torres. I was an Army medic discharged 3 years ago after an incident in Syria. I just read about your program." The woman's voice was hesitant. "I'm wondering if you're still hiring." Emily felt her chest tighten. She heard herself in Torres's voice, the uncertainty, the hope, the fear of reaching out after years of hiding. "We are. Can you send me your resume?" "You should know, my discharge wasn't exactly honorable. There were questions about my conduct during the incident. I was cleared eventually, but it's in my record." "Send me everything," Emily said firmly. "Your resume, your service record, details about what happened, and then we'll talk." "You mean that?" "I mean it. I know what it's like to have your record questioned. I know what it's like to carry that weight, and I know that the official version isn't always the truth." Emily paused. "Send me your information, Jessica. Let's see if we can't write a better ending to your story." The woman on the other end was crying. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means." But Emily did know. She knew exactly what it meant to have someone believe in you after years of being dismissed, to have your skills valued instead of questioned, to be given a chance to prove that the worst moment of your career didn't define your entire worth. After the call ended, Emily pulled up the list of applications she'd received for the new veteran positions. 43 people, all with stories similar to hers or Torres's, all trying to find purpose after trauma. She couldn't hire all of them, but she could hire some. And those people would go on to work with patients, mentor other veterans, prove that second chances were possible. The impact would ripple outward in ways Emily couldn't predict. 6 months after the congressional hearing, Emily was invited to speak at a military medical conference. The audience was filled with active duty personnel, combat medics currently deployed to conflict zones, military physicians responsible for battlefield medicine. Emily stood at the podium, looking out at faces that reminded her of who she'd been 7 years ago, dedicated, exhausted, wondering if the work they were doing mattered. "I'm not going to tell you that the system is fixed," she began, "because it's not. There are still officers who prioritize careers over people, still procurement processes that fail when they're needed most, still regulations that prioritize paperwork over life-saving." The room was silent, everyone listening intently. "But I'm also going to tell you that the system can change, that corruption can be exposed, that people who abuse their authority can be held accountable." Emily paused. "It won't be easy. It won't be fast. And it will cost you personally, your comfort, your anonymity, maybe your career." She thought about Helmand Province, about the years of guilt, about standing in front of Congress while Vance tried to destroy her. But it's worth it, because the alternative is staying silent while good people are victimized, while resources are stolen, while soldiers die from failures that could have been prevented. And I don't know about you, but I couldn't live with that silence anymore. After the speech, dozens of people approached her, medics with stories about supplies that never arrived, physicians who'd seen reports altered, soldiers who'd watched careers destroyed by false accusations. Each one wanted advice, wanted to know how to fight back, wanted to believe change was possible. Emily talked to every single person, gave them her contact information, connected them with lawyers and investigators, built a network of people willing to support each other through the process of speaking truth to power. It was exhausting, it was overwhelming, and it was exactly what she was supposed to be doing. On the flight back to Riverside, Emily received an email from Nash. He'd been promoted to full captain and assigned to a Pentagon position overseeing military medical operations. His first initiative was implementing Emily's trauma protocols across all combat hospitals. "Your work is going into the field," he wrote. "Medics deploying next month will have access to equipment and training that didn't exist 6 months ago, because of you." Emily stared at the message, feeling the weight of it. Somewhere in a combat zone, a medic would face an impossible situation. And because Emily had refused to stay quiet, that medic would have resources she'd never had, would save lives that might have been lost. The cycle was breaking. The system was changing. Maybe not fast enough, maybe not perfectly, but changing nonetheless. 1 year after the Riverside Memorial attack, Emily stood in the hospital's new trauma training facility, a state-of-the-art center funded by donations from grateful families and medical foundations. The first class of veteran medical personnel was graduating, ready to start positions at hospitals across the country. Sarah was among them, promoted to trauma team lead. Torres had finished top of her class and accepted a position at a VA hospital in Texas. 15 others were starting jobs at facilities implementing programs based on Emily's model. Emily addressed the graduates, looking at faces filled with hope and determination. You're walking into a field that doesn't always value your experience, that sometimes questions whether combat medicine translates to civilian practice, that may try to make you feel like you have to prove yourselves over and over. She paused. But I want you to remember something. You've already proven yourselves. You've operated under pressure most people can't imagine. You've made life and death decisions with incomplete information and limited resources. You've kept fighting when everything was falling apart. The graduates were nodding, recognizing their own experiences in her words. Don't let anyone make you small. Don't accept narratives that diminish your value. And don't stay silent when you see things that are wrong. Emily's voice was firm. The medical field needs what you bring. Your skills, your perspective, your refusal to give up on patients when protocols say there's no hope. That's not a liability. That's your strength. After the ceremony, Emily walked through the facility with Holloway, observing the equipment, the training rooms, the spaces designed specifically for teaching combat trauma techniques. You did this, Holloway said quietly. Built something from nothing. We did this, Emily corrected. Everyone who believed it was possible, who fought for funding, who took chances on unconventional approaches. Still, you were the catalyst, the person who refused to accept that things had to stay broken. Emily thought about the version of herself that had worked as a floor nurse, invisible and silent. That person seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different life. I just got tired of being afraid, she said. No. Holloway stopped walking, turning to face her. You got tired of letting fear make your decisions. There's a difference. That evening, Emily sat in her apartment, a new one, in a better neighborhood, with actual security and windows that overlooked the city. She decorated it with photos from the trauma program, commendations from hospitals implementing her protocols, and a framed copy of the congressional testimony that had changed everything. Her phone buzzed. A group text from Nash, Reeves, and Kowalski. 1-year anniversary of the worst day turned best day. Drinks at O'Malley's. Emily smiled and typed back, I'll be there. The bar was crowded, filled with off-duty military personnel and federal agents unwinding after work. Emily found Nash and the others at a corner table, already halfway through a round. The hero arrives, Nash said, grinning. He looked healthy now, fully recovered from his injuries, back to the sharp-eyed officer she'd met in that trauma bay. I'm not a hero. You kind of are, Reeves said. Took down a general, exposed a corruption network, changed military medical policy. That's pretty heroic. I just did what needed to be done. Kowalski raised his glass. To people who do what needs to be done, even when it's hard. They drank to that. The conversation flowed. Updates on the courts-martial. Vance had been sentenced to 23 years in military prison. News about officers who'd been promoted to replace the corrupt leadership. Stories about program successes and failures. At some point, Nash pulled Emily aside. I need to tell you something. Emily braced herself. What? We found the last of Webb's network, the contractors who disappeared, the offshore accounts, the foreign contacts. FBI and DOD worked together, tracked them all down. Nash's expression was serious. It's over, Emily. The threat is neutralized. You can stop looking over your shoulder. Emily felt something releasing inside her, a tension she'd been carrying for so long it had become part of her normal state. You're sure? I'm sure. The people who wanted to hurt you are either in prison or running so hard they'll never risk surfacing. You're safe. Safe. Emily tested the word, seeing how it felt. For a year, she'd lived with security details and threat assessments and the constant awareness that someone might try to finish what Vance started. And now it was over. What are you going to do with all that free time? Nash asked, smiling. Build more programs, train more people, maybe sleep occasionally. Emily looked around the bar at the people laughing and talking, living normal lives without constant fear. Maybe remember what normal feels like. You'll never be normal. You're too stubborn for that. I'll take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. Later, walking back to her apartment, Emily stopped on a bridge overlooking the river. The city spread out around her, lights reflecting on water, traffic moving in endless patterns. Somewhere out there, hospitals were operating, medics were making impossible decisions, soldiers were fighting battles that would mark them forever. And because of choices Emily had made, because she'd refused to stay silent, refused to accept injustice, refused to let fear dictate her path, some of those medics and soldiers would have better resources, better training, better chances of survival. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Emily pulled out her phone and opened her contacts, scrolled through names of people she'd met over the past year, veterans finding new purpose, students learning combat medicine, journalists investigating corruption, senators pushing for reform. One name stood out. A soldier from Helmand Province named David Martinez, who'd reached out months ago to thank her for saving his life. They'd stayed in touch, occasional messages about recovery and moving forward. She typed, "How are you doing?" The response came quickly. "Better. Started physical therapy program. Might be able to walk without assistance soon. How are you?" Emily thought about how to answer that. A year ago, she would have said she was fine, deflecting any deeper inquiry. But she'd learned that honesty, even uncomfortable honesty, was the only way to build anything real. "I'm good. Really good. Building things that matter, helping people, not hiding anymore. That's all we can do, right? Keep building, keep fighting, keep moving forward." "Yeah, that's all we can do." Emily put her phone away and continued walking, her steps steady, her path clear. She passed a newsstand where her face was still occasionally featured in articles about the corruption scandal, past a hospital where her protocols were being implemented, past a coffee shop where she'd once sat alone, invisible and forgotten. She wasn't invisible anymore, wasn't forgotten, wasn't the person who accepted shame for failures that weren't hers. She was Emily Carter, Director of Emergency Medicine, Congressional Witness, builder of systems that saved lives. And most importantly, she was someone who'd learned that the worst thing that ever happened to her wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. 2 years after the congressional hearing, Emily was invited to the White House. The president wanted to present her with the Presidential Citizen's Medal for extraordinary service to the nation. The ceremony was formal, dignified, attended by military leaders and political figures. Emily stood on the platform, accepting the medal, listening to words about courage and integrity and refusing to be silenced. She thought about Helmand Province, about the soldiers she'd saved and the ones she'd lost, about 7 years of believing she'd failed them. The guilt was gone now, not because time had passed, but because she'd finally understood the truth. She'd done everything possible with what she had. The failure wasn't hers. It never had been. After the ceremony, a young woman in army uniform approached her. She couldn't have been more than 23, fresh-faced and nervous. "Ms. Carter, I'm Specialist Emma Reeves. I'm deploying to a combat zone next month as a medic." She paused, gathering courage. "I just wanted to say thank you. The training I received, the protocols we learned, it's all based on your work. And knowing that someone like you fought through what you did and came out stronger, it gives me hope that I can do the same." Emily felt tears threatening. She'd met hundreds of people over the past 2 years, heard countless stories of how her testimony had impacted their lives. But this, a young medic about to deploy, carrying Emily's lessons into combat, this hit differently. "You're going to face impossible situations," Emily said quietly. "You're going to make decisions no one should have to make. And when you come home, you might carry guilt about the ones you couldn't save." Specialist Reeves nodded, understanding. "But I want you to remember something. You're not alone. There are people who understand what you're going through, who will support you, who won't let you disappear into silence and shame." Emily put a hand on the young woman's shoulder. "And if you ever need someone to talk to about the combat, the aftermath, any of it, you call me. Anytime. I mean that." Reeves was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. That means everything." After Reeves left, Emily stood alone in the White House corridor, holding a medal she'd never imagined receiving, thinking about the path that had brought her here. It hadn't been smooth. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments when giving up seemed like the only option. But she hadn't given up. And because of that, young medics like Reeves were walking into combat zones better prepared than Emily had been. Veterans were finding purpose and employment. Hospitals were saving lives they would have lost. The work wasn't finished. It would never be finished. There would always be more people to help, more systems to change, more battles to fight. But Emily was ready for it. Not because she was fearless or perfect or unbreakable, because she'd learned that strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up, even when staying down would be easier. It was about speaking truth, even when silence would be safer. It was about building something good from the ashes of something terrible. And it was about refusing to let anyone, no matter how powerful, no matter how threatening, make you believe you were less than you actually were. Emily Carter had been dismissed as just a nurse. Now she was the reason people survived the impossible. And that, she thought as she walked out of the White House into sunshine that felt like vindication, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.